See 22 participants in this meeting thus far, 6 of whom are PSC members. We may be getting a couple more to join shortly, but I've got to read an opening statement, so I'll begin the meeting. I'm Chair Spivak, and we'll call the meeting to order. So, in keeping with the Oregon Public Meetings Law, statutory land use hearing requirements, and Title 33 of the Portland City Code, the Portland Planning and Sustainability Commission is holding this meeting virtually. All members of the PSC are attending remotely, and the city has made several avenues available for the public to watch the broadcast of this meeting. The PSC is taking these steps as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to limit in-person contact and promote social distancing. The pandemic is an emergency that threatens the public health, safety, and welfare, which requires us to meet remotely by electronic communication. Thank you all for your patience, humor, flexibility, and understanding as we manage through this difficult situation to do the city's business. And I will start now with items of interest from commissioners. I'm not seeing any hands up. I do have one to add, so I'll jump to that. So when I volunteered to serve as chair of the PSC, I said at the time that I'd love to create additional leadership opportunities within the PSC, because just because I'm chair doesn't mean I need to be the face of the PSC all the time. So I've been brainstorming with staff a way that other PSC commissioners who might have interest could take the lead on particular projects if they'd like to try it out. And it's taken me a while to get the knack for running a meeting, going through the process of the hearing, the public testimony, the deliberations, and a recommendation to City Council. And coming up, we've got a slew of projects. We have E-zones, we're starting today. We've got the Housing Continuum Project, the Tree Code, racial equity work and racial justice, historic resources, sign code amendments, and West Portland Town Center. So all these projects are queued up to start in the next half year. And I just wanted to, we're still gonna work out the details, but if there's any other people in the PSC, especially newer members who wanna try this out and have interest in one of these projects, let me know, and we'll start figuring out whether maybe you could carry one of these things through. In addition to that, I'm gonna express some thanks to commissioners who have already stepped up in other leadership roles. Katie and Oriana served on the Budget Advisory Committee last year, and that will be coming up again towards the end of this year in a very different structure. So we have the Southwest Corridor, and the best of our notes is that that's Chris, Ben, and then Mike, Oriana, and Jeff expressed interest at the last PSC meeting. And I know that Oriana's done some assistance with community involvement. I'm not sure whether it's the CIC or PIAC. There are two different groups that work on that at the bureau level and the city level. And lastly, back when we had a retreat, we had some volunteers, myself, Steph, Oriana, Akash, and Daisy, about how to make the PSC more accessible, serving on the PSC more accessible. So that's just sort of like a download. And then one of the items that's coming up now is DRAC. We have a representative to DRAC. Jeff Bacharach has served that role thus, at least in recent memory. And I thought Joe could just give us a brief summary of what DRAC does, because that's up for reappointment. The PSC can appoint someone to DRAC, and we have the opportunity to do so. So Joe?
Yeah, thanks, Eli. So DRAC is the Development Review Advisory Committee, and it's a committee of under the auspices of Bureau of Development Services that advises the Bureau and its director on policies and budgets and regulations and procedures that affect the development review process. So, and the purpose of the committee is to really promote the predictability, accountability, efficiency of the permit review process and look for improvements to that process. The committee also acts as an advocate around policy issues. When we have new code packages, for instance, coming from our projects, we often go brief DRAC to get their feedback. DRAC, if moved, would take that recommendation to you all or even to City Council. I believe that they meet monthly. It's an early morning meeting. The agenda is also focused on some sharing of what's going on in the development markets and community that the permit review process affects. And I think it's got 14 members. So, and we have one of those positions is reserved for a member of the PSC.
All right, thanks, Joe. I got Mike's hand up.
Yeah, I thought I mentioned that the Oregon State Marine Board invited us to participate in their upcoming meeting / hearing on the lower Willamette River wake zone issues. And Steph and I are going to represent the PSC, and Debbie and Caitlin Lovell from the Bureau of Environmental Services will participate as well for staff. Basically, what they want us to do is to give them background and the rationale for the recommendation we made to City Council and earlier in our letter to the Marine Board. That's, I think, on July 22nd.
Thank you guys for doing that. I'll be at backpacking then, so I'll not be able to participate myself. From the first list of leadership opportunities, do any of those people want to just jump in now? I'm not going to try and twist any arms. People don't need to sign in for things, but if the things that caught your interest, you're welcome to chime in now or give me a ring in the next couple of days just to see what interest there is out there. So this would be for DRAC or for helping to guide a code project through. Okay. We know that Jeff is willing to continue serving on DRAC if that's of interest, so that's an option for us. I don't think he's on the call, at least not yet. Kat.
Oh, I was just going to say, if certainly don't want to take Jeff's spot. If there's an opening on DRAC, I could be interested in helping out there. But I've served on a lot of things, and there's a lot of other opportunities for other people to step up. So I would say I'm the last person to fill in if it's not filled.
Okay, thank you for volunteering again. Ben.
Likewise, I would say exactly the same as Kat. I'd be open to at least consider being part of DRAC, that committee. But again, if there's the opening.
Okay. Well, there is an opening. It will be up to us to decide who will fill it. So thank you for offering up. Any other comments or volunteers? Okay.
Just to repeat, I am here, Eli. Just to repeat what you said.
Oh, I didn't see you, Jeff. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. No, there's some things we're trying to reposition with DRAC, so I would like to continue on at least for a little while longer.
Okay, thank you. We got 3 people game to do it. I guess we can take it to officers to see if people want to have Ben keep going. I'm sorry, have Jeff keep going. And bring it back to our next meeting. Does that sound okay?
Well, I guess my 2 cents would be if Jeff is interested in staying, as I said, I'm not interested in taking over his position if he's ready to stay. And certainly Ben, if he's expressed interest, I would go ahead then and pull off my name as a option.
Okay. Ben, do you have any thoughts?
Yes, I think we can probably discuss this further. I'd like to know a little bit more. My kind of understanding of what DRAC does is fairly high level. So I'd like to learn a little bit more about that, and perhaps see if there's interest perhaps in switching some of the other maintenance that I have. For instance, I'm part of the Airport Citizen Advisory Committee, been there for over a couple of years. Maybe it's time to have someone else come in. It's very interesting, but at the same time, there's only so much extracurriculum activity you can do. So we just have a broader discussion about other involvement.
Thanks for reminding us of that one. We did some brainstorming to remember all the committees everyone's on. It's a lot, and I missed that one in the summary. Thank you.
Ben, if you're interested in creating some space around the airport committee, I think given my role at Verde and Cully, which is heavily impacted by the airport, I think I might have interest there if that freed you up to move into a different space.
That sounds like a great idea, actually. Yes.
Anyone else want to chime in terms of leadership opportunities? All right. Well, feel free to ping me outside a meeting, and we'll have this to talk about at our officers meeting in a couple of days. With that, let's go to the director's report. I think this is going to be Joe and Eric, perhaps.
Yeah, so what we have today is a number of updates just on activity at City Council. And the first is Eric's here, hopefully, to update you all on how expanding opportunities for affordable housing project turned out at City Council. So Eric, you want to take it away?
Sure. Thanks, Joe. Good afternoon, commissioners. I believe you all reviewed this package earlier in the year and passed it on to City Council in March. This is the Expanding Opportunities for Affordable Housing project, which, as you recall, was designed to give more flexibility for institutions that operate as conditional uses in residential zones to build housing on their campuses, primarily often underutilized parking lots. Your recommendation was received by council. They held hearings. This was actually, I think, their first land use hearing in COVID times done remotely, so that was interesting as well. They made a couple changes to the proposal, but largely adopted it intact. The 19 of the 20 sites that you all recommended for rezoning were accepted by council. They did remove one that generated quite a bit of testimony, and that was partly out of an abundance of caution to avoid appeals and to maybe have time to dig deeper on that one site. The code package, again, was largely adopted as you proposed. The biggest change was the addition of an affordability mandate. You may remember that we discussed the allowance for not going through conditional use review was unencumbered in your initial recommendation, and council felt that the institutions that are taking advantage of this exemption really should commit to doing regulated affordable housing, and generally that perception was shared by most of the institutions, and so council made that change to the code. So in the end, the conditional use exemption is only available to those projects that are qualifying for the SDC exemption for affordable housing. They pegged it to that existing program to avoid creating new housing bureau programs that would create more work for people. The other thing they did is they put two additional directives in the ordinance, not in the zoning code, but in the ordinance directly. One was they did get some additional testimony on half a dozen additional sites that wanted to be part of the package. And rather than delay the package to hold additional hearings on those additional sites, what they did was directed us to come back in the fall with a recommendation, sort of a package B, if you will, for those additional sites. And so we'll be doing that in the fall. And they adopted it as an emergency ordinance, so it's in effect now. The other directive that they included was a directive to BPS to pursue a broader project to look at zoning changes where there is potentially a social justice benefit, particularly in areas or with people who have been affected by past harms that have been created. And this was in part driven by the one site that you guys discussed that was not an institution. The council grappled with that, and ultimately they didn't include that site in this package, in part because they also didn't want to drag out the appeals and have additional hearings. So they recommended that we pursue an additional project that's similar to this, but with a broader suite of beneficiaries, not just constrained to institutions. And so we've been directed to work with community to scope that project this year and come back at some point with a recommendation. So those are the two outcomes of that project. And that really is it's following up on the Racist History of Zoning report that we did, as well as ongoing work with Fair Housing Council and other equity and social justice efforts that we've been doing, and looking at how we can think about zoning again in that way. Are there any questions about that set of changes that council made?
I see one from staff.
Thank you for that. So the Clay, if I'm hearing you correctly, the Clay residents and ones like it would be considered not for this fall, like that that subsequent package, but at some point in undisclosed point in the future.
The Clay residence was also on the list potentially for the fall. If we can come to a conclusion, we may do that, but we left it flexible for that particular site. But they generally saw the broader need for a package that wasn't limited to institutions.
Great, thank you.
One question for me is the affordability requirement to meet the SDC waiver threshold for 100% of the units or some lesser number?
It's, I believe it's 50% of the units, if my memory is correct. And there's two different thresholds, one for ownership and one for rental. And it's in the, if you want to look up the details, it's the SDC waiver in the, I think it's a rule in the Housing Bureau's portfolio.
Okay. Katie.
Yeah, it sounds like there's going to be a new project, and the project is going to be, is it going to be larger or smaller than the one that we just worked?
That's to be determined. I think we have to. There was the council's desire was that we scope this in tandem with community, that we not just huddle internally with staff and figure out what this is going to be. So we have some ideas, but I'd be hesitant to sort of set the tone for it without first talking to community.
Well, that sounds great, because I could see that might have broader application than the specific Northeast site that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And Joe, do you have any other updates if we don't have more on this?
Yeah, I'll do this real quick. A lot of your work has been going through City Council in the last few weeks. So last week, Central City 2035 was approved at second reader, and it will go into effect on August 10th. So that one was a big decision, still open to potential for appeal even this round, but was approved at second reader. Last week, we also had the hearing on the expiration date for land use permits project. And that went well, and the mayor and city council added 4 amendments to the list that you all did. They included that they were going to move the time period for eligible projects. If you were a project that's in the pipeline starting March 8th, 2017, you were eligible for the land use review extension. They also expanded, made virtual public meetings be legal, a way to meet the public meeting requirement until January 1st, 2024. They passed an amendment to reduce the 3-year extension of the current sort of inclusion rates for inclusionary housing outside the central city and gateway to 1 year. So within that year, the mayor and the Bureau of Housing and Portland Housing Bureau committed to step up to do the analysis, to reconsider, or to just evaluate and have that discussion about whether or not that rate should increase. And then finally, they extended the effective date for the new rates on system development charges from July 1st, which was when it went into effect, to August 1st. And that's because of the backlog of permitting getting through Bureau of Development Services right now. And that goes to second reader on July 22nd. And then they also forwarded residential infill last week, and that goes to second reader on August 5th. Thanks.
Thank you. And the amendments on RIP, it seems like the steeper affordability was included.
All 6 amendments were included.
Okay. Jeff, question.
Yeah, Joe, 2 questions. First is on Central City 2035. There's anticipated there's going to be another appeal of that. And the last time we went through the appeal, there was a lot of confusion between the bureaus and developers about which code applied. Could you apply under the old? Did you apply under the new? Has there been any attempt I know there's been discussion over the last couple of months about, is there a way to bring some clarity to which version developers should be applying under? Is there an option or any kind of guidance from BDS or the city attorney's office of what's going to happen in the event of another appeal?
Well, on August 10th, the new code will be the code in effect. So when you apply, that's the code you'd apply under, Jeff. And I think it's a 21-day appeal period that starts either on the day of the vote, which was last week, or on August 10th. And in that period, it could be appealed. If it's appealed, then during appeal, it's still in effect. But what we end up doing is we have developers or applicants for permits sign a waiver that they acknowledge that it's at their own risk. We're feeling pretty optimistic about the ability to defend the plan against at least the appeals that we heard of in the past. So we're feeling pretty solid about that. But it could be appealed, yeah. We'd be back through this process we just completed again.
Wow.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
And Joe, I may have turned my hearing aid off for a second. You said part of the package was from City Council was they're going to move forward with the IZ study. Is that?
That was for the expiration date project. When you all the amendment that you all forwarded to City Council put that lower rate in effect for 3 more years to match up with how long you're extending the land use. We're sort of a 3-year recovery from this COVID-related economic recession. City Council felt the urgency around affordable housing was such that they wanted to get that work done more quickly, and so they're going to only extend it for 1 year.
But did you say something about what work do they want to get done?
Well, part of the reason for the extension, remember that we were on the Housing Bureau was supposed to undertake a study of just how inclusionary housing is working, if the price is set right, is the production meeting, what other possible tweaks might be needed to improve the effectiveness of that program. The money that it was going to take to do the economics part of that analysis was spent for COVID recovery. So it was not in their work program for the coming year. And so with this, they've bumped it up to find a way to get it into their work program in the coming year.
And when that study was presented to us as a briefing 1.5 years, maybe 2 years ago, we, as a commission, said we wanted very much to be sort of an equal partner with the Housing Bureau and the scoping and the implementation of that study. Is that going to continue forward now? And has that been remembered by all parties?
Well, it's been remembered, and as they figure out how they're going to proceed forward, we'll all revisit that together.
So the expectation is still that Planning Commission will be partners with.
That's our expectation. I don't know that it's a closed deal. I think we all will revisit it together.
Yeah, thank you.
I think it might be great to resuscitate that letter we sent a while ago to folks that we would like to have a role in that process.
Yes. Yeah, it's understood. So.
Okay. The last thing I guess I've got down here is that our July 28th Psc meeting is going to begin at 4 p.m. instead of the usual 5 p.m. start time. So remember that coming up. And with that, we'll shift to the consent agenda. Would someone like to make a motion for consideration of the minutes from our June 23rd meeting?
So moved.
I heard a Steph saying yes, and then who seconds it?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Jeff, for seconding. So any concerns? All in favor, say aye. Just say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That way the screen bounces around on me. I can see everyone's shot. Thank you. The consent agenda passes. Next item on our agenda is the design overlay zone amendments. And this is going to be a work session. I'll start off with disclosures. While it's not clear whether the proposed changes create a potential conflict of interest for PSC members because the changes affect such a broad class of property owners, in the interest of transparency, we have the following declarations. Commissioner Smith owns property in the design overlay zone. I, along with Commissioner Schultz in Bortolazzo, or for architectural or development firms who conduct work in Portland. And with that, I'm going to shift over to Laura and Phil. And also, we have as part of this discussion, Julie Livingston from the Design Commission. But first, let's go to Laura and Phil.
Okay, thanks, Eli. And we've got about an hour planned, and I think we're running a little behind. And Julie's going to give a little overview after we give a short presentation, but she has a Design Commission Landmarks Commission at 1:30. So we're going to zoom through our thing pretty quickly. So Laura, I don't know if you want to go ahead and share the screen. Also, just a caveat, I was going to share the screen, but I think I might be in password limbo.
Can you see it? Can you see the screen? Okay.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I had the other thing open. So I believe my password is expiring today, and I've been having some issues. So I wanted to have Laura share the screen in case I suddenly go away. So just to let you know, we're back for another work session and hopefully a motion and vote. Just to kind of go back in time, public comment for this project closed back in November, and of course that feels like a lifetime ago at this point. And at our last work session on June 9th, the PSC did finish voting on all the zoning code amendments. And so next screen. So here's what we have for our agenda. We're going to give a pretty quick overview of the project, the context and where it came from, and the summaries summary of the amendments. We're going to pass it on to Julie Livingston from the Design Commission, who made their recommendation on the guidelines back in June. So she's going to give a quick summary on that. We did want to allow some time for final discussion and reflections there before we go to the motion and recommendation. So if you go back even further in time than November, the DOZA origins came out of our work with the comp plan, which was over 5 years ago. And as a result of the comp plan update, we both changed significantly our goals and objectives within the comp plan. We also expanded where we mapped the design overlay zone to include a lot more centers and corridors than we had previously. But at the same time, there's a recognition that our design overlay zone had not been updated, especially the regulations had not been updated in about 20 years. And so a definite refresh was needed. And also an acknowledgement that both the guidelines and the standards were originally written with a combination conservation and design bent in play, because they applied to both conservation districts and to the design districts. Lastly, there was definitely an acknowledgement that the two-track system for standards and guidelines did not necessarily result in parity of projects in terms of design quality. So we did work with a consultant, created the DOZA assessment findings, and many of those findings have made their way into code.
So we're going to just quickly summarize the amendments in these broad categories. The purpose of the overlay, a map of where it applies, the thresholds, including exemptions, when a development can use design standards, and triggers for types of review in design review. We'll go over the process, code, and administrative changes and tools, which include, of course, the design guidelines and the design standards in the two-track system. So we're just going to summarize these as a refresher, and then we'll talk about some of the bigger picture impacts to the city. And as a starting point, as you know, we spent great length with both the PSC and the Design Commission to rewrite the purpose statement to align with our comprehensive plan. Because the design overlay zone has been more recently applied to areas where there is tremendous capacity for growth and transformation, the purpose has really pivoted to center on people in harmony with nature, as described in chapters 3, urban form, and chapter 4, design and development. So the focus of this tool really has pivoted. It's moved away from a statement that is sort of biased on maintaining a traditional architecture to focus on growth and livability. This new purpose statement is not necessarily based on solely what the building looks like or how it fits in. It's really about people and how people feel included and comfortable in our densest areas. It establishes the 3 tenets that the tools build on: context, including the built and natural environments, but also the cultural and social aspects of a place, the public realm, and fostering inclusivity and welcome. And lastly, equality and long-term resilience, which acknowledges adapting to climate and demographics. With the new purpose statement that is focused on how to meet the needs of areas with the most growth, our town centers and our inner corridors, it made sense to remove the overlay from single dwelling zone properties, except for the Terwilliger Design District, which has its own guidelines that really treat the area more like a conservation district than an area of growth. We had initially asked other areas if they would be interested in expansion of the de-overlay, and that's why you see some of those blank circles on the map. But there was a concern and a desire from equity-focused groups not to expand, especially as we were updating the regulations. So I just wanted to make note of that.
So over the years, the design overlay zones had created a fairly convoluted set of exemptions and thresholds. And one of the things that came out of the assessment was this idea that we needed to simplify and make more clear the list of thresholds and when the design overlay zone should apply, with an eye towards potentially allowing smaller projects to potentially not have to go through the process. So several of the things that we did include exempting all small scale residential projects from the design overlay zone requirements, as well as some smaller scale residential or retail commercial additions or rooftop changes. As far as the thresholds, we've of course expanded the opportunity for applicants to be able to choose to use the objective standards in more cases, including for taller buildings, and also to allow them to use the standards in some cases with the Gateway Regional Center. And we felt that with the Gateway Regional Center having a mix of smaller and larger businesses, this would provide an opportunity for some of those small businesses to go through the permit process without having to go through a land use review. We simplified the tables that determine the threshold of land use review that a case goes through to just have one set of standards or one set of thresholds for a central city and another outside of the central city. And then one of the things that was discussed at the PSC was acknowledging that bridges can often have a pretty large impact on the surrounding area, and to add bridges to the type 3 land use review threshold so that they are being reviewed in front of the Design Commission at a public hearing. Several changes were made that applied to both the administration of the design overlay zone and the process for the discretionary design review. Those included requiring a wider range of expertise on the Design Commission itself. And that includes having a sustainability expert and a natural resource expert on the Design Commission. The existing design advice request, which is a process that occurs before the land use review is submitted. That process has been formulated and made formal within the code, and also to provide more certainty, the meetings are now limited to one meeting unless the site has multiple buildings. This provides an applicant with an idea of what the end date would be for that DAR. Before they have to move to the land use application. In addition, we clarified what factors that a design review can look at, including the fact that floor area and height is not a factor that can be reduced through the approval of the design review. One exception for the height is there are a couple places in the code where height is a provision that specifically requires design review approval. And then finally, the last bullet there represents the administrative improvements that are ongoing that BDS has been doing to make the process clearer for applicants and stakeholders, including providing notification for renters, not just for the owners when there's a land use review.
As I mentioned, there is a shift in the focus for the purpose of design overlay to the 3 tenets. And so within the guidelines, which again are the discretionary regulations, there is a new emphasis on social and cultural context, intentionally listening to communities, especially those underrepresented, to promote design, signage, and art that contributes meaningfully to a place and its narrative. There's also a new emphasis on site design, so recognizing that the comfort and dignity of residents and workers shouldn't stop at the street level, but should be extended throughout the site to create welcoming spaces. And finally, there's a focus on climate with the new guideline number 9 that requires applicants to think about the burdens of climate impacts and to show life cycle costs and long-term environmental impacts in design responses. So then within the standards, which are the clear and objective regulations in the zoning code, there is parity between these things that I've mentioned in the guidelines and what is required within the design standards. We've established a tighter set of required standards that are reasonable to require within all sites, and then a larger set of standards that are worth points. And then depending on the site size, every project will be required to achieve a certain amount of points, which allows for certainty because the expectations are clear and the goals are clear, but there is also flexibility and less rigidity. And as a reminder, within our current tools, there really isn't much wiggle room in the design standards. And this slide is really just a reminder of how we started with the 3 tenets. We developed the design guidelines that respond to the tenets and the values that are listed in the comp plan, and then created these parallel standards that are grounded in the same goals and are searching for the same outcomes. And so these are really the 5 buckets in a nutshell. But Phil and I also wanted to take a step back and look at the bigger picture and the lenses that have been very important in our discussions. So let me switch to that. So with equity, I've mentioned how the new purpose statement has made a very intentional pivot to center on people who live and work within the developments being created. In terms of the map, there was a recommendation from our equity-focused areas not to expand the de-overlay zone, especially as we're rewriting what those regulations are. So this isn't a proposal, but it's just a direct outcome of our equity work. The thresholds, which include more exemptions and the ability to use the design standards rather than go through design review, reduces barriers in terms of time and ability to navigate the system. And this was a recommendation from our assessment that came from an equity focus group to let the small stuff go, especially as small business owners are making storefront improvements to areas that are starting to see more growth. The process for design review is aimed at reducing time and increasing certainty for the public and the applicants. And then for the tools, the guidelines have introduced new language that acknowledges development's role in the past for upholding racial disparities and worsening opportunities for communities of color. And language really urges a design response that promotes anti-racist built environment and promotes inclusive design and history artwork from communities of color and underrepresented groups. In terms of the standards, there is more flexibility in the standards, as I mentioned, that echo the types of design responses asked for within the guidelines. Our current design standards really have a one-size-fits-all approach to the areas where design overlay is applied. And these areas are the places where we have growth and the most dense areas, as I mentioned. Many of the more traditional architectural-based solutions really today promote a Western architectural style, and that's been removed in these standards through DOZA. So the vertical windows, cornices, a base, middle, top. Today, if you don't comply by these norms, you go through design review. So we've really opened up the types of architecture to really support people because it better supports people-centered purpose statement and it forwards our equity goals. And then lastly, we're encouraging an affordable retail on the ground floor through Prosper Portland's Affordable Commercial Space program. And this was really to incentivize culturally specific businesses. And this also came from a recommendation from our equity focus groups.
So in feeding off of the last slide a bit, this slide shows illustrates the ways that the DOZA project is impacting development proposals above what the current practice is with the design overlay. And it's kind of taken from the perspective of an applicant or builder. So running across the top of the table is some of the notable changes that have been instigated, whether it's changes in the exemptions, adding flexibility to the choice of when you can use the design standards, limiting the number of preliminary meetings, or developing a better set of guidelines and standards. And then along the left side are those potential impacts that these changes can have on the costs, time, and uncertainty, and also with material requirements. So what we found is that in general, these impacts are found to be largely positive since they allow more flexibility for projects to choose their path, whether it's a discretionary review or to use the standards. It allows applicants to choose which standards to apply. And it also provides a greater choice in the types of materials that can be used. So we found that in general, this does provide a positive impact. The couple places where we say that there's maybe a minor a negative change may have more to do with the fact that, of course, with flexibility, sometimes for some developers that may mean additional work or some uncertainty. Some developers just want to be told what material to be used. They don't necessarily, or what path or what standard they have to meet. And since this does allow more flexibility, it does potentially create other opportunities for developers, but also can maybe create a little bit of uncertainty on that about which direction they should go. But in general, we feel that this is making a positive impact on the development opportunities. So with that, go to the next slide. I'm going to go ahead and pass this on to Julie Livingston, who's going to provide a little summary of the Design Commission's experience, which actually culminated in their recommendation for the citywide design guidelines on June 18th. And I think we'll stop sharing the slides at that point. But if you notice that once she's done, we'll have the round robin discussion, and then we'll bring back up a slide for the motion.
Thanks very much, Phil. And thanks to all of the commissioners for inviting me to your meeting today. So yeah, DOZA, this is momentous. DOZA has been in the works for 5 years for my entire tenure on Design Commission. And it has been a big lift for Design Commission. I think maybe it has been an even bigger lift for Planning and Sustainability Commission, and certainly for all of the commissioners from both that served on the 3x3. The original report that was adopted by City Council, the report that was written by Walker Macy, adopted by City Council in April of 2017, really did recognize that Portland has an international reputation as a walkable city, and that we have a very successful public realm, and that this is due, at least in part, to about 40 years of consistent design review, and that our guidelines, our standards, and our review process all work in concert to deliver this great urban environment, really good results. So the report that was published by Walker Macy, suggested some gentle improvements to process and definitely an update to tools that were out of date, rather than a wholesale renovation of design review. The report recognized that our system wasn't broken, but that it would definitely benefit from a refresh. And as Phil and Laura laid out, the recommendations were for improvements to both administration and then process and tools. And so Design Commission rolled out a lot of administrative improvements in the summer of 2017. We've made a lot of changes to what happens in the hearings room, how our meetings are organized. And then those administrative improvements were followed with many process improvements. Most importantly, I think, aligning the design review process with the actual design process so that the review happened at the right time in the design process to support the forward movement of projects. Tools, guidelines, and standards have been the last piece of the puzzle that we've tackled, and that's probably because it is the most difficult work. Clarifying the scope and the purpose of the de-overlay, using the 3 tenets to simplify, consolidate, and revise guidelines and standards. And then probably most importantly, ensuring that the community design standards, which up until this point have been fairly ineffective and really not applicable to most contexts in the city, ensuring that they are effective. And this is, from my perspective, really milestone work. Countless people have touched the process over the last 5 years, but we have had consistently strong guidance from Sandra, Phil, and Laura, also Stacy Monroe from the design review team. And the new guidelines and the standards, they will shape the Portland of the mid-21st century rather than reflect the Portland of the mid-20th century. So they are definitely forward-looking, definitely aspirational. Our new citywide design guidelines, which the Design Commission voted on a couple of weeks ago, are really well aligned with the goals of the 2035 plan. There are fewer of them. They are better organized. The content is relevant, and the prose is very clear and direct. Big thanks to Laura Lillard for her incredibly hard, dedicated work on recrafting these guidelines. They are really valuable to the design review process. They are a strong tool. And the new community design standards, they had farther to travel, but they too now align with the goals of the 2035 plan, and they will deliver better outcomes for the neighborhoods and the applicants that rely on them. They simultaneously kind of raise the bar for a building's public realm response, but then also allow for greater flexibility in how that is done. Over the course of the DOZA process, we had many 3x3 workshops, 3 commissioners from Planning and Sustainability Commission, 3 from Design Commission, and then also many planners from both BPS and BDS. These 3x3s really provided consistent attention, I think, to issues of equity and sustainability throughout the guidelines and the standards. And without those 3x3 workshops, I don't think that we would have such clear, thoughtful, and forward-thinking results. So it's been a real treat to work closely with Kat and Ben and Mike in the 3x3s. And I very much look forward to the 2 commissions hopefully being able to work together again closely as we develop character statements.
Thank you so much, Julie. And thank you so much for representing your commission at not only your meetings, but ours as well. And I hear you have to go to one. Can you stick around for a little bit, or you have to head on out?
No, I'm going to stick around till 1:30, and then I'm going to pop over to a series of briefings we have this afternoon with Historic Landmarks Commission.
All right, well, thank you so much. Let's take this chance to do a little go-round. And if you're a PSC commissioner, we have a chance for round-robin reflections on this project before our Title III recommendations get bundled, I think, with the design guidelines the Design Commission's already voted on heading to City Council. So if anyone wants to just raise their hand virtually, I can see you there, and I will call on you. I see Mike. Mike, can you unmute?
Yes, starting again. I agreed to serve on the 3x3 with a little trepidation because it was definitely a stretch for me to understand a lot of the discussion we had, all the way from, how many inches a window should be recessed to larger issues related to sustainability. And I actually was not that familiar with the workings of the Design Commission, and I really enjoyed the opportunity to go back and forth. I've actually recently been engaged in it as an advocate on a particular project. And so I've learned a lot more about how the Design Commission functions. And I think that the give and take between the two groups, the Design Commission and PSC, was really healthy and very productive. I enjoyed it a lot.
Thanks. Anyone else? Dan.
Generally speaking, I think it's been a great experience from my standpoint. I particularly appreciate the organization very early on, and I believe that came from the assessment project into the 3 tenants, at least the tools part, the context, the public realm, and the quality and resilience. I think that gave a fairly strong structure from the get-go, because the possible pitfall in a project like this is that you can get stuck in in the minutia and the details, and it's really hard to keep an eye on the goals. So I think this organization allowed us to do that. Maybe there is a lesson learned here where perhaps for other future projects, maybe that's a way to start with an assessment, an overall assessment. Maybe this is an independent firm, just like Walker Macy did, and really look with clear and objective eyes how the system currently works, and look for opportunities for improvement. And that, I thought, felt like provided a great platform for the project to start. And I also wanted to second what Julie said, especially in regards to the 3x3. It's been a pleasure to work with her, the other Design Commission members, and fellow Design Planning and Sustainability Commissioners. I think that was a lot of work, but it felt like it was very productive, great discussions. I really enjoyed this process.
Thank you, Ben. Oriana?
Yeah, I want to start just by showing appreciation for Laura and Phil and the hard work that they put on this project, for Julie for the collaboration with the Design Commission for our 3x3, and especially for Kat for sharing all of the expertise that comes from working for an architectural firm, from running an architectural firm, and being on the Design Commission. But I think being really candid here and being a little bit of a Debbie Downer, I found this to be a frustrating project to work on from an equity perspective. I don't know that we've ever really, despite raising the issue around housing costs, really had an honest conversation and a really transparent conversation about the impacts on that front, especially in this COVID moment. And especially about whether design review and some of the processes associated with it are something that we want to impose on housing at a time when we need it, and at a time when housing costs are increasing while people are becoming increasingly cost burdened on that front. So I think that just in light of, to bring this around on a more positive note, in light of some of the conversations we're having around equity and scoping going forward, this is the kind of project where not only do we need to start with kind of an objective review like the one that Ben just talked about, but we also need to talk about like, how are we grounding this project effectively in equity? And I want to show appreciation for Laura for including that slide, which talked through some of the good improvements that have been made through DOZA, and I think improvements over design review as it was from a culturally specific perspective. And from other perspectives of equity, in particular, listening to community members, like I know folks in the Cully Boulevard Alliance were adamantly opposed to having design review extended to that area. So I want to show appreciation for the listening that happened there. But I think DOZA is the kind of project, and there are other projects coming in the pipeline for us that we really have to think through. Like if we want to be more grounded in equity, and we want to be more grounded in racial justice, and we want to figure out how to repair and show reparations for some of the harm that's been done in the past around planning work. How do we do this better in the future, and how do we make sure the projects that come for us are really grounded in equity first and objective work second?
Thank you. Chris.
Yeah, thank you. I want to echo the appreciation for the 3x3 and for staff and all the intense work that's gone on to get us to this point. One of the guiding lights for me in the last few years in the commission has been the urgency to create opportunities for housing. And I think what I take hope from in this project is that there are more paths to use standards so that you can have more of a certain path to get your housing developed. So I appreciate that while still allowing, I think a well-structured review process for people who want to get more creative than the standards allow. And I think I'll stop there and let other people talk. Thank you.
I'll chime in. I agree. Thank you also to my fellow commissioners for serving on the 3x3. It was nice to see all that action happen behind the scenes. And I think this is a great project. It's made a lot of headway. I think that I'm a believer in standards, but for us to rely on the standards have to get better. And I think this project makes the standards a lot better than they were. Hence my comfort level relying on them to ensure that we have a really strong public realm. Because if we don't have that, there's going to be a backlash against buildings that will be constructed going forward. And we need to have a concentration of residents, businesses, workspaces in close proximity to core transportation, public investments, parks, things like that. And people have to love the buildings and the landscapes around them. And I think this project will help with that. I think it also serves as kind of a reach code, frankly, which has always been a little bit strange for me, but it has brought out a lot of new green building and lower carbon footprint elements into expectations for new buildings in the overlays. That brings me to one thing which is always a little challenging, is that although we've changed in some ways the focus of design review in this project, the map remains the same. And I think that if we sort of went at this, as staff summarizes, an anti-racist package with a really people focus, and then we look at the map we have, I wonder if the map might be a little different if that were the focus. I mean, why isn't that everywhere in the city? Immediately comes to mind. Some parts of the city wanted to be out of it. So I don't have a solution to that, except that I think that as we get better standards and they start infusing other parts of the zoning code, which has happened in the past, the mixed use zoning project is one of them. I think that some of the good ideas that come out of design overlay will be picked up in base zones over time. So I'll leave it at that. And I guess I got to say, I looked at the gateway. I didn't realize, I knew we were allowing by right use and gateway through this project, but I didn't realize there was a 35-foot threshold. So I'm not going to raise anything right now, but it seems like a kind of a small threshold. I'm going to pass the baton though now to Kat and then Steph after Kat.
So my husband is talking in the background. If Steph is willing to take it from here, maybe he'll stop talking soon.
Steph.
Okay. The other person who might talk right now is my dog. So just in case, her name is Olive. The one I want, again, just thanks, the same thanks. Also special thanks for not being on the 3x3 because it was enough of a learning curve not being there. That just thanks for taking that for the team. But one thing that's come up a number of times, this is Olive, is like, what is the purpose of design review? And I've heard that, a number of times, and I think that what I have come to understand is that this is all a laboratory, that we are living in a laboratory, that like, how do we get the standards to a place where design review has historically brought us? How can we move it into objectivity and predictability? And I would love to see us in the next 1 to 2 years look at how are we tracking against standards, and what does that mean in terms of what is where does design review fit within that? Because we hear and I want to take to Oriana's point that we had a lot of conversations at the officers meetings over time about like, how do we talk about cost burden and affordability related to standards and review. We started with Sandra had we had spreadsheets of possible numbers of examples, and realized that going to specific numbers was going to be everything is so contextual, it can't hold, those numbers couldn't hold. So it was a general understanding that like When there is less predictability, it increases time and uncertainty, and that translates to cost. That's what I heard from that. I would love to see in the next, over the course of a few years, how does that pan out with standards and review? Is there a way for us to understand basically the impacts of what we have done here today? And because this isn't the end of just DOZA. This is, the next iteration and information. So those are a few of my thoughts. I have a lot of other rambling thoughts, but I can come back to them.
Okay. Thank you, Steph. Jeff?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess that's free for a minute, Jeff. Give me.
Yeah, no.
The window might not be long.
I'm in a quiet room. Let me talk. Thank you, guys. So first of all, wow, Julie, really? We've been doing this for 10 years. That was really eye-opening. It looks like she just jumped off, but Julie provided such an excellent summary, as she always does, and she was an excellent kind of co-chair in this process. So kudos to her for all of her hard work. Then real quickly, I know this process felt to a lot of people like we spent so much time in the weeds and a lot of kind of maybe questioning of whether that was worthwhile. But I think there was always a desire to make sure those standards, which is the time we spent in the weeds, really and wanted that time because it was critical to achieving the parity that Laura had kind of talked about in her summaries with the design guidelines, to all the, which then reflects all the points that many of you have made about hoping to allow for a little bit more ease to get projects approved and through a process because there's more clarity. Oriana, your comments on equity were completely fair. And as I was listening to Laura's opening statements and hearing that there were certain communities that were not interested in a design overlay, and especially communities of color, it made me really kind of want to scratch my head and say that's concerning for the entire city and the whole community. So there's something there that we haven't gotten to the bottom of. And so I'm concerned about that. I think it's critical, as Steph just said, that we do continual iterations on this project and not just let it sit for another, I don't know how many decades before we kind of revisit, and that this should just constantly be worked on and updated and revised to reflect community values and changes. So that's critical. It's critical as we're doing that to be analyzing the equity component of design review. And it is absolutely critical that we create character statements for neighborhoods. And so I really hope that we make sure that gets reflected in our letter back to council, because that if that work isn't done, then we, I think, have broken our promise to many of the communities that came to us during the comp plan to ask to have design review overlay put in place. So, and right now, I don't think their character is really represented. And I think it's an opportunity to streamline the code as well in the future to alleviate the need for neighborhoods to come through and create their own neighborhood design guidelines. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you, Kat. Jeff.
Okay, first, yes, thank you to everyone's staff and fellow commissioners who put in all the time. And one thing I am persuaded of, particularly by Kat and Julie, is the leaders. This is a better product than what we've got now. I mean, I'm persuaded that new DOZA is certainly better than existing design review. And so ultimately, I'm going to support it for that fundamental reason. I do share the concerns that some people have raised, Oriana and others, in the fact that COLI, which is certainly one of our more progressive, informed neighborhood groups, didn't want any part of this, is concerning, as Kat said. And I assume the fundamental reason is these sort of regulatory processes are costly. I mean, and so if you're looking at, I want to save money, I want to build something quickly, cost effectively, you want to avoid costly, time-consuming regulatory processes. And so I think the fundamental question is almost a cost-benefit analysis. Is cost burden this is going to create worth it, because we're going to ultimately achieve much better community oriented buildings, the context, the people realm. And I think that's the jury is out on that. And I fear that we're asking too much of DOZA. We're asking DOZA, we've gone far beyond trying to make buildings look good and work well with the public realm. And we're asking them to do lots more things. We're asking them to do sustainability. We're asking them to do green infrastructure. We're asking them to serve equity. And I think we've weighted down the goals and aspirations of DOZA beyond what can be achieved through a design overlay process. And that's where I hope I'm wrong. I'm hope that all the pieces have been so well crafted, we will achieve all that. But I remain highly skeptical that this sort of regulatory structure can produce that sort of intangible public benefit. I am going to support it because I think it's, as I said, it's better than what we've got. But I think we've created an awfully high level of expectations for this process. And so we will launch this, and hopefully we'll see, I'll be proved wrong, and we will start to see really better functioning buildings. And my last comment is I wish, rather than revisiting this in a year or two or three, I wish we could maybe start smaller, maybe limit it to Central City, see how the standards are working, wait for character statements, wait for an improved economy, and then maybe expand it out to the neighborhoods. But that's just a thought that's not on the table. So again, thanks to everyone's efforts. I am going to vote in support of it, despite my concerns.
Thank you, Jeff. Katie. Katie?
Yeah, I just I wanted to thank everyone that was involved in this project. And I especially wanted to thank the people that did the 3x3 or whatever it was called. I have really admired my fellow commissioners during this time and the expertise that you bring to the commission. And I do, when you end a project like this that has high expectations and some goals that it's trying to meet, I do hope that there's a robust way to measure the impact that this will have, and I'd like to hear the measurements, and I'd like to hear about the successes. So I'm really, it is so natural to finish a huge project like this, and then we just go on to the next thing, and there is no kind of follow up and follow back through, and that's really needed. It's always really needed. And so it'd be great if next year we heard DOZA had this impact, and then and then 2 years from now, DOZA had even more impact. And that would also make the case to the neighborhoods that are not interested. And, like maybe there's unintended consequences, and we could stop those before we went on. So that's all. And I also wanted to say we do need to do character statements. I think we said that kind of upfront, and saying it again is probably not a bad idea. So thank you again. This is a really quality project, and I have appreciated all of the hard work that went into it.
Thank you, Katie. Well, I think that was a go-round for us. Unless there's any, Jeff, is your hand still up, or intentionally or not? Okay. Unless there's any additional comments, I think this would be the time to get a motion. And I don't know, I've got in front of me a modified motion that staff sent me, which I could read, or if someone wants to put it on the screen, someone else could.
I can share it on the screen.
Thank you.
It's a lot of words.
Yeah. And so, yeah, Eli, we made a few changes after having a conversation with BDS. One of the things they were wanting to make sure that they could potentially work on is provide some updates or related to the one of the appendices where they have provided some information about their administrative improvements, and especially because of the changes that have happened with the coronavirus and sort of having to kind of pivot how a lot of things are being done. There was a question about maybe some of those things should be updated and incorporated into that report. So they just wanted to make sure that that you weren't necessarily recommending that the council adopt the version that is in the appendix as of now, because we may want to make a few changes and updates to that as we move forward. Okay. And technically, since they're administrative improvements, they don't really need the approval of anybody. But we thought we'd incorporate that in the package.
Hey, would someone like to make this motion? I see Mike Hauk has your hand up.
No, I had my hand up for another reason. I just wanted, going back to the character statements, I just want to reiterate what I think I said at an earlier meeting, and that is the first character statement that has been produced was in the Macadam area, South Portland. And the neighborhood folks I've talked with were quite pleased with the fact that staff really listened to their concerns, and my understanding is they're feeling pretty good. You know, there are a couple small items I think they would have preferred regarding height and so forth, but I think staff did a good job and was very responsive to that neighborhood and their concerns. So just a couple kudos there.
Thanks. Okay, I'm open to a motion.
I would be honored after all these years working on it to make the motion.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, so I would make the motion to direct staff to revise DOZA Volume 1 staff report to clarify proposals, rationale, and update the commentary as necessary, to refine the recommended zoning code language, formatting, and commentary in DOZA Volume 2 as necessary, including standards for architectural concrete, update DOZA Volume 4 appendices to provide background information as necessary, and to recommend that City Council adopt DOZA Volumes 1, 2, and 4 proposed drafts as amended, amend the zoning code as shown in Volume 2 as amendment, and amend the zoning map as shown in Volume 2.
Second.
Second from Mike Hauk, and I am, at this interest of brevity, not going to repeat the entire motion, but rather ask Julie to do a roll call for the passage of DOZA.
Backrack.
Yes.
Bortolazzo.
Yes.
Hauk.
Yes.
Larcel.
Yes.
Maniera.
Yes.
Routh.
Yes.
Schultz.
Congratulations, DOZA team. Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Spivak.
Yes. Motion passes unanimously. We will forward this to City Council. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, staff, enormously for your great work on this long-term project. And unfortunately, you're not done yet because now I go to City Hall.
And I want to thank Stacy for listening in and being on hand in case we did have any questions of the BDS administrative work. And lastly, wanted to thank Julie Livingston for being there and providing her perspective from the Design Commission.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks.
Next step, we're going to shift gears a little bit to climate adaptation. And I'd like to invite forward to the front of the room, Michelle Krim, and whoever you would like to join with you to give us a briefing.
Okay, thank you so much. And so there are several other colleagues from other bureaus that are going to be joining me here. So again, I'm Michelle Krim. I am the Chief Sustainability Officer in the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. And several months ago, I was before you with some other colleagues where we gave you a briefing and an update about the city's climate work, and specifically focused on the things that we were doing to reduce carbon emissions. And then we also talked to you about the Climate Emergency Declaration, which I'm excited to say was adopted by Council at the end of last month. So, and so here today, we're here to share with you the other sphere of climate work, which is adaptation and preparation and resilience, and specifically what is the city doing to understand, to prepare for, and to mitigate the risks associated with a changing climate. So as all of you know, we have a really long history of climate planning in the city. 2009 climate plan was the first time where we really ever talked about adaptation and preparation. And essentially, that plan said, this is a thing, we should probably look into it and go figure out what to do about it. And so that's essentially what was said in the 2009 plan. We then, a bunch of staff went off and did a lot of work to really dig into that. And we created what became the climate change preparation strategy. And then as we were updating the climate plan for 2015, and in large part due to Mike Hauk's advocacy and encouragement to really combine that into one plan, so that the city's climate action plan wasn't just about reducing carbon emissions, but was also about preparing for the impacts of climate change. And so since that time, a lot of work has been happening, and so we're here today to share some of that with you. And so with me is Kavita Hine, who is the Climate Science and Adaptation Program Manager in the Water Bureau, Nishant Parulakar, who is an engineer in the Bureau of Environmental Services, and he manages the resilience program there, Erica Koss, who is a geotechnical engineer in the Bureau of Development Services and is sort of the resident expert on landslides, and Jen Cairo, who is the city's urban forester with Parks and Recreation, and then Jana Papa SMU, who's a planning, policy, and community program manager in the Bureau of Emergency Management. And so all of us are going to just go through some of the things that our bureaus are doing. And so there's a lot of us and not a lot of time. And so this is intended to be sort of a quick little taste test of the things that are happening. And then we're more than happy to come back and dive deeper into any of these topics that you might be interested in learning more about or discussing more. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and then turn it over to Kavita Hine from the Water Bureau. And she's going to share, do some initial sort of a little bit of a primer about climate, the climate projections and science, and then tell you a little bit about what the Water Bureau is doing. So before we get started, I just want to verify that you all can see my screen okay? Yeah, okay. All right, so Kavita, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Michelle. Hi, everyone. As Michelle mentioned, I'm Kavita Hine. I'm the Climate Science and Adaptation Manager at the Portland Water Bureau. And go ahead to the next slide, Michelle. I wanted to just give you all an overview of the main climate impacts we can expect in Portland. We don't have a lot of time today, so this is going to be a very brief review of those impacts. And then I just want to touch on some of the work that the Portland Water Bureau is engaged in with regard to climate adaptation. So the first main takeaway message I really have for you all that I don't think is very surprising, but it's an important one, is that Portland's future climate is going to be warmer than its past. And this might seem like a simple statement, but from a warmer atmosphere comes a whole cascade of impacts to our natural built and community systems that we need to be prepared for and adapt to. This graphic here shows how Oregon's air temperature has warmed on average by about 2 degrees Fahrenheit since the 1900s. That's the black line. And for the future, climate models project we're going to see warmer conditions. There's actually a range in what air temperature could be in the future. That's the yellow to red band on this graphic. And that really has to do with what happens with global greenhouse gases. But the message is clear, is that we are going to continue to warm into the future on average across the year, both in Portland and across the region. And we know that when temperatures rise on average, we also see a change in extreme conditions. So you can go to the next slide, Michelle. So a concern with that is that we are expecting to see an increase in the number of high heat days in the Portland area in the future. And in fact, we've already observed an increase in the number of days above 90 degrees. This data is from a weather station at Portland International Airport, and it shows how days above 90 degrees Fahrenheit have actually changed since the 1940s. And so we can see here that days above 90 degrees in the peach color and days above 95 degrees in the red color have increased in recent decades. And in fact, the 2010s actually had the most number of days above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. While triple-digit temperatures are still pretty rare for Portland, they have a big impact on our communities and our public health. And so while they haven't increased significantly, we do see that those are projected to become more common in the future. And this is, of course, concerning for public health, for ecosystems, for our water systems, and so forth. And so we need to think about these extreme conditions in the future. And go to the next slide, Michelle. And so with rising air temperatures and extreme heat waves, we can also expect a greater risk of drought, wildfires, and associated smoke waves in the Portland area. Those of you who have been around Portland for at least the last few years will probably remember that we had some pretty smoky summers in 2015, 2017, 2018, where we had really poor air quality, and there were wildfires burning either locally or somewhere else in the Northwest region. But there are profound impacts from those types of events to our communities, to our quality of life. There are implications for vulnerable populations, as well as tribal resources and recreation economies. And those types of years could become more common in a warmer climate. We also, in 2015, experienced a record-breaking snow drought in the Northwest. And this was unprecedented because what really happened was we had sort of average rainfall in the winter months, but we had such warm temperatures that there was no snow falling anywhere. It was just rain. And there was a sort of a cascade of impacts throughout that year to water systems, ecosystems, recreation areas across our region in 2015. And these are the types of sort of severe drought conditions and years we need to anticipate potentially, again, becoming more common in the future. Go ahead to the next slide, Michelle. And then with a warmer atmosphere, the last point I want to touch on is we can expect a shift in the intensity of the water cycle, right? Because a warmer atmosphere has a different water holding capacity. And so that means changes in the amount and timing of rainfall, as well as snowfall, and a shift in the risk of extreme events like flooding. So this graphic at the top here is from the National Climate Assessment, and it points to the fact that the Northwest region has experienced an increase in the number of heavy rainfall days historically. Now, local trends vary. That's not the increase in heavy rainfall days for Portland, but it is an important thing that we need to monitor moving forward is how are we seeing extreme storms and heavy rainfall events change in the Portland area. And the Bureau of Environmental Services is doing some good work to understand the impacts of heavy rainfall to our stormwater and wastewater systems as well. So the other thing I want to mention is that research has indicated that certain types of storms that are called atmospheric rivers, which bring moisture from the Pacific Ocean to the Northwest, they could potentially become more intense and frequent in the future. And that's concerning because those types of storms are often associated with flood events in the Portland area, such as along the Columbia and Willamette River basins, like we saw in 1996. And flood events often create other hazards like landslides and infrastructure damage. So that's just a very brief overview of climate impacts that we need to anticipate and prepare for. As I said, warming is the key message here. There are implications for all sorts of systems in Portland that will be affected by a warmer atmosphere. So I'm going to switch gears now, thanks Michelle, and just talk to you about some of the work that the Portland Water Bureau is doing on climate adaptation. As you've just heard, there's sort of a range of risks that we need to prepare for as a city. Our water utility has been taking the approach that we need to plan for a range of future conditions across our water system. So we have for over 20 years worked with climate scientists nationally and in the Portland area to assess the impacts of climate change to our primary water supply, which is the Bull Run watershed. And that is an important component of our climate adaptation work is understanding the water supply impacts. But especially in recent years, we have really begun to recognize that climate change presents a significant comprehensive risk to our entire water system and our organization. So while we need to be concerned about water supply and water quality, we also need to think about risks to our built systems, to our workforce, and to other components of how we deliver water to our community. So to plan for these changes, we are, as a utility, building adaptive capacity. We've worked to develop tools and modeling resources and assessments to understand what climate change really means for Portland's drinking water system. And we're building staff capacity and expertise to do that. We also are considering equity in our long-term decision-making and planning as it relates to climate change work. One example of how climate change is really at the forefront of how the Portland Water Bureau is looking to the future is that it factors into our most recent strategic plan, which you can visit on our website if you're interested. And we really highlight how we're going to implement different climate change strategies across our organization while considering equity and racial disparities. So you can go to the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. One more thing on that slide. Go back, Michelle. Sorry. The Portland Water Bureau also I wanted to mention is a member and the current vice chair of the Water Utility Climate Alliance, which maybe you haven't heard of, but this is a national group of water utilities that are working collaboratively to advance climate adaptation for the water sector. And our leadership and involvement in what we call WUCA allows us to bring lessons learned back from the national and international stage to really prepare and plan and adapt better and implement best practices for our water system. So go ahead, Michelle. So I just want to touch on two projects that we're currently engaged in. Again, there's a lot more work behind the scenes, but two things that you might find interesting include a collaborative project that we have engaged in with Portland State University and their climate science lab and Dr. Paul Loiketh. And this project is using self-organizing maps to assess future extreme storms and dry weather systems. So self-organizing maps are basically a cutting-edge machine learning approach that query historical and future weather and climate data. And the really interesting thing about this project that, hopefully you can see on the screen here is that we can get really compelling graphical products from this analysis that have been able to tell us what types of historical storms and weather patterns have impacted our water supply, which is the Bull Run watershed, in the past, and how could those weather systems change in the future. Similar work was done by the Bureau of Environmental Services for the Portland area with PSU, but this study of ours is looking specifically at the Bull Run watershed. And we can really understand which types of weather systems are most impactful and which we need to plan for better and which might change. This project is informing our operational short-term work as well as our long-term water supply planning. And then you can go ahead to the last slide of mine, Michelle. The other project I just want to mention, the Portland Water Bureau is currently engaged in, has to do with evaluating heat impacts to our outdoor workforce and our infrastructure. And that's with the Water Utility Climate Alliance. So you heard me talk about extreme heat as being a concern in the Portland area. We're also concerned about it too because of implications to our own workforce. We recognize that there will be inequities in how climate change affects our workforce in different ways. And so this project, Portland is one of 5 case study cities nationally modeling and looking at how heat exposure in the future could change with extreme heat waves. And we've looked at particular exposure of the types of jobs that our field workers conduct in maintenance and construction and operations of our water system. The graphic on the right shows one of the products from this analysis, which is looking at future heat index days. And the heat index is this combination of air temperature, but also relative humidity, because it's that combination that really has the biggest impact on human health and safety. And we are able to, from this work, assess how the heat index could change in the future and at what points we need to be more concerned about the exposure of our outdoor field crews from the aspect of occupational health and safety. And we're really trying to understand in this project how, in particular, our Black, Indigenous, and people of color workforce could be impacted by extreme weather conditions in the field as well. The final other point on this project is that we are also examining how extreme heat in the future could affect our electrical and mechanical systems that move water around Portland, which are really important, obviously, to us serving the community, and how those could be at risk from extreme heat and what strategies we can implement to reduce the exposure and make those systems more resilient. So with that, I will wrap up, say thank you, and go ahead and hand it over to the next speaker.
All right, Nishant, are you on? You might be on mute if you're trying to talk.
I'll check. Michelle, do you know, are you tracking time for your group presentation?
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
We have an hour, right?
Yeah, until like 2:45?
Yeah, yeah.
I'll give you 5 more minutes because we started a little late. Thanks.
Okay. I know Nishant was on earlier. Nishant, are you on?
Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I'm sorry. I see this slide. I'm hoping we've been in discussion for a long time, and for the services we provide, some of the bigger concerns for climate change.
Nishant, you're breaking up and kind of cutting out.
You want to adjust the order, perhaps, to give him a chance to troubleshoot?
Okay. Yeah, how about we'll do that? Nishant, we'll come back and circle back around.
Can you hear me?
Oh, now I can hear you. Yeah, do you want to give it a go again? No. Okay. Erica, are you on? Do you want to jump in and start with your section, and then we'll circle back to Nishant?
Sure. I'm also having internet issues. I'm not sure. Maybe if people want to turn off their videos, it might help a little bit if you're not speaking. So wave at me if I'm cutting out.
Good.
So I'm Erica Koss. I'm a geotechnical engineer with the Bureau of Development Services and also the chair of the city's Bureau Landslide Committee. Michelle, are you? Oh, there we go. All right, great. So I'm just going to give you a real quick overview of the advancements that we've made in the past recent years with landslide hazard and risk assessment in the city. Starting off in 2012, the State Department of Geology and Mineral Industries provided a series of maps that were based on LiDAR topography. Previously, our landslide hazard map looked like that one on the left there, which is just pretty much a very large polygon of the West Hill. So it wasn't very accurate or precise in regards to where the hazard was located. Next slide. In 2016, I was able to hire an intern through the Institute for Sustainable Solutions, who was able to gather data from across the city and compile it into one landslide database, also working with Doug Amy at that point. The file on the left is an actual picture of our previous BDS landslide database. And on the right is the completed database, which includes over 1,800 documented landslides in the last 100 years or so. Next slide. So using that database, we were able to ascertain that we get about, on average, about 20 landslides per year, except for extreme years. You can see that there's over 800 landslides that occurred in 1996. Since 2016, the trend has continued with about 70 landslides in 2017 and only a few in the last couple of years. Next slide. Okay, also working with Doug Amy. Oh, it looks like my photo disappeared of the Burlingame landslide. Oh, there we go. We were able to use several different methods to assess losses, annual losses. Our analysis indicates that on average, each landslide takes about $100,000 to repair. So that's about $2 million in losses per year, except for in extreme years, of course, it's many, many more millions. And also one landslide can exceed that 2 million by itself. There's a picture of our 2008 Burlingame landslide on the right, which was many millions of dollars and several houses lost. Next slide. All right, in 2017, I again was able to get an intern through ISS, which was fantastic. We worked with the USGS. They had installed a series of instrumentation in the West Hills in 2006, and in 2017, they published that data. Those instruments included 15-minute increment measurements of soil moisture conditions. And so we were able to analyze under what soil moisture conditions landslides are triggered from storm events. So for example, if you get a large storm at the end of summer, you will not see landslides initiated because the soil is just too dry. That same storm at the end of March may trigger several landslides. And I'd also like to point out that the soil moisture data is very interesting. You can see from 2008 on the left side of that graph there to 2017 on the right side that there is a trend toward drier soils annually. The dips on the bottom are at the end of summer. You can see that the soil becomes wet quite quickly once it starts raining. But these hotter, drier summers that we saw, you can definitely see in the soil moisture condition data. Next slide. All right, so the USGS took our landslide database and their instrumentation data and put together this graph of when landslides are actually triggered. The green dots are actual landslides, and the purple triangles are false alarms. So you can see that the data needs to be, we need to sharpen our pencils a little bit. The 10-day antecedent soil saturation and the 3-day cumulative rainfall may not be the best or the only indicators of landslide initiation. Next slide. So what we need to do in the future is sharpen our pencils and figure out what the most predictive triggers are for landslides, and then compare that to what the models are saying as far as storm events and hotter, drier summers, and try to determine whether we'll have increased or decreased landslides due to climate change. At this point, we don't really know. Increased storm events makes you think that we'll have more landslides, but if the soils are drier to begin with, that may not be the case, and hotter, drier conditions will also lead to increased evapotranspiration. That is all I have, so I'll turn off my video.
Okay. All right, Nishant, it sounds like there are intermittent internet outages all over town today, and a couple of our speakers are definitely getting dropped. And so, Nishant, are you back on per chance? Okay, maybe not. Okay, so we'll just keep going. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the work that has happened related to specifically looking at heat and urban heat islands. And some of you may have seen the map on the left or some version of that before, produced by Dr. Vivek Chandas and his team at Portland State University. And so, you know, these map and the data that goes with this map is really informative in terms of helping us understand where in the city it gets hotter, and particularly looking at how that changes over the course of the day to help us identify particularly those places that get hot and stay hot, where they don't cool off as much at night, which can be a really big factor in terms of public health impacts associated with increased heat and heat waves. And then the map on the right is some additional work that they did to help identify where there are higher concentrations of people who would be expected to be most vulnerable to heat. And so you can combine these two things together and really identify those parts of the city that are essentially priority hotspots for us, both because they tend to get hot and stay hot compared to the rest of the city. And also there are higher concentrations of people living in those areas that might be more vulnerable to heat. So this research like this is really informative and useful, but it tells us maybe where we need to be looking, but it doesn't necessarily tell us what to do or how to really make a difference in those parts of town. And so I wanted to just give you one example of where we have applied this sort of research to an actual project in the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. And that was through the leadership of Bill Cunningham and at the time, Mark Asnes in BPS to help inform the work that they did on the Better Housing by Design project, which I believe most of you are pretty familiar with. And so in this case, we wanted to look at different parts of town, and particularly East Portland and those areas where there are those priority hotspots, to look at how different land use patterns, and in this case, sort of design and development of multifamily buildings would either help or exacerbate those urban heat island impacts. And so we worked with Dr. Vivek Chandas at PSU to do some really detailed modeling for us and looking at different sort of design prototypes that were being developed through the Better Housing by Design project. And so on the left side, on the base case, that's a sort of actual development pattern that exists on sort of an area in East Portland. And then looked at a development pattern for prototype A, which might be something we would potentially typically see, especially in East Portland. It looks a little bit more like the photo on the top on the right, which is more of a kind of barrack style buildings with lots of parking, kind of surrounded by parking lots. And you can see there that that sort of development pattern increased the temperature in that area by about 5.5, little over 5.5 degrees Fahrenheit. Prototype B looks at, like, if you reorient the building slightly and add some trees and other green infrastructure, you can bring those heat impacts down quite significantly. And then prototype C, which looks maybe a little more like the picture on the lower right, is considerably more green infrastructure, as well as changing the reflectivity of the surrounding pavement. And that is a very, the black asphalt really gains a lot of heat and holds on to that heat and then re-radiates it, including throughout the night. And so more reflective pavement can really drop the temperature in the area pretty significantly. And you can see there, you can actually start to reverse those urban heat island impacts. And so this was a really useful research project for us to take those maps that generally tell you where something might be an issue, but to help us really understand how different policy decisions could actually impact those things. And so that was an interesting project that I would love to see bureaus in the city do more of to make that research more actionable. The last thing I want to tell you about is a group called the Disaster Resilience and Recovery Action Group, affectionately known as DRAG. And this is a group of the infrastructure bureau, so Water, Bureau of Environmental Services, Transportation, and Parks, together with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, as well as the Bureau of Emergency Management. And we've been working together for years to try to wrap our heads around sort of disaster resilience and recovery, and specifically looking at both a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake, as well as the natural hazards that could come from climate change impacts. And so this group has come together initially to work together to identify critical infrastructure assets, and then to identify the risks to those assets associated with these different disaster and natural hazards. And then also to identify cascading failures, which is where the failure of one bureau's infrastructure can then impact another one. So an example of that might be a water main breaking underneath an emergency transportation route and washing out that road, for example. And so we spent a lot of time really trying to identify all those places where the bureaus could help each other and when they might actually be hurting each other in the different disaster scenarios. The other thing this group has been working on that I think is a perennial problem for all local governments, but particularly in the city of Portland, is how do we coordinate and collaborate across the different bureaus? And how do we make, in disaster, both resilience and recovery planning, bureaus can't be off just making their decisions in a silo because those decisions affect each other. And so trying to figure out what are the governance and the decision-making structures that could be designed to help the bureaus do this work collaboratively, both with themselves as well as with key partners like utilities, and then also with community, and particularly with communities of color and low-income populations. And so this group is continuing to work on those issues and is advancing both the development of a citywide resilience and recovery strategy and as well as trying to define and come up with a governance and decision-making structure, and then begin testing and piloting that structure as well. So that's exciting work that I think has really helped the bureaus to collectively advance their work on climate adaptation and understanding the risks associated with those climate impacts. So let's go ahead and move on to Jen with parks.
Great, thanks, Michelle. I'm going to turn my video off now that you've all had a chance to see me and recognize me for connectivity reasons. And I am Jen Cairo from Parks and Recreation, and I'll be speaking to green infrastructure and climate and the Parks Bureau's role in that. So first slide here, Parks owns about 15% of land in the city, making it the largest landowner. And those lands are primarily comprised of living things, nature and natural resources, or as we call them in urban settings, green infrastructure. A key Parks role is green infrastructure services provider and manager. And while we collaborate with many stakeholders, other bureaus, private entities, residents, et cetera, Parks is responsible for the majority of the parks and natural areas in Portland, as well as the city's urban forest. This includes, for example, Forest Park, the park blocks, Oaks Bottom, Westmoreland Park with Crystal Springs Creek, street trees, trees on private and city properties, in wetlands and riparian systems, et cetera. So the list you see here is a sample of the essential services that nature provides all of us. And these services are often localized, so we need them directly where people are. With increasing human population, forest and other ecosystem loss, and the growing climate crisis, preserving and designing and programming to increase nature where people are is more important than ever. So Parks has a key role in climate action in the city. Next slide, Michelle. Okay. One important outcome of the climate crisis is species and ecosystem decline and potential loss. This slide is from a presentation delivered by Dr. Aaron Ramirez at Portland's annual tree summit we put on last summer. He and colleagues are studying the impacts of the climate emergency on trees in our region. The brown trees in the picture are dead, and this is a lot at one time in one place. This is abnormal in normal cycles. Here we not only lose those essential services they used to provide, we also get outcomes like increased wildfire risk, opportunity for invasive species to proliferate and outcompete native species and ecosystems, and landslides, erosion, and water body siltation, where these root systems that stabilize soil have died. In Portland, an example is the decline of western red cedar trees through Jipicata. Red cedar is a significant part of native wooded habitats, our urban tree infrastructure, and an important species culturally and functionally for Indigenous peoples. They're also big, long-lived, and beautiful trees, and their decline is dramatic and traumatic. Parks work includes identifying, tracking, and addressing such impacts of the climate emergency through collaboration with researchers like Dr. Ramirez, our own and residents' observations, and with those, implementing actions like stewardship education and policy changes. Next slide. Portland's urban forest services are not equitably distributed. West of the Willamette River, residents enjoy 56% average canopy cover. If we don't include Forest Park, tree canopy there is still 44% on average. East of the Willamette, average canopy cover is 21%, which is on par with Los Angeles. 80% of our city's population lives east of the Willamette, including significantly more low-income Black, Indigenous, and people of color. The pattern of natural areas, parks, and other green infrastructure distribution is generally similar to the tree canopy distribution. We see here this long-standing environmental justice problem, and it's being exacerbated quickly and markedly by the climate crisis. Next slide, Michelle. So I took this slide from a New York Times article last August in 2019. It was reporting on newly published peer-reviewed research that asked whether the practice of redlining was predictive of high heat, so urban heat island effect, which you heard about earlier, in 108 different American cities, including Portland. If you're not familiar, hopefully you are, redlining is the policy of denying loans, mortgages, and insurance to people of color, so a practice of institutional racism for a long time in the United States. So this graphic helps show what that research found. Green, and the darker green, is the lowest temperature. Red is the higher temperatures. And the difference between the two is up to 18 degrees Fahrenheit, which is huge in temperature terms. So where do we see the green? Parks and natural areas, our green infrastructure, primarily distinguished by the trees there. And where do we see the red? Large streets, hardscaped areas, highly developed, and low tree areas. Historically, redlined areas are in the redder areas. So, hey, Portland made the New York Times. Unfortunately, not for good reasons. Because of 108 cities, Portland was the worst, showing the strongest correlations. Black, Indigenous, and communities of color, immigrants and refugees, and low-income residents receive fewer services from nature infrastructure. They're most directly impacted by the climate crisis and also have most limited resources for response and adaptation. Next slide. So what are we doing about that? Parks recently undertook a project with Portland State University and many residents, primarily from East Side, low canopy and low income areas and communities of color, to learn how together we can improve tree services, particularly in these areas. The report on this work is called Growing a More Equitable Forest, and it is Portland's tree planting strategy. We started implementing it about 2 years ago, and this is one example of Parks climate action work. Go to the next slide, Michelle. I borrowed this image from my colleagues at the Bureau of Transportation. This street is in a Japanese city. It's a high volume street in a commercial area. It has bike lanes, lighting, bus service and bus stops, parking. The buildings presumably have water, sewer, and electric service, so all the common needed infrastructure in the limited space of a public right-of-way. So, of course, we have streets similar to this serving these same functions here in Portland. I'd like you to think for a moment, how do those streets compare to this image? Think about 82nd Avenue, Lombard. Think about Sandy, Powell, and Division, especially if you're familiar with the recent project that TriMet and Pbem are doing to improve Division. I think you'll see there's quite a difference between this image in Japan and what we have here in Portland. So some techie forestry concerns aside, this street is a good illustration of what we're working towards in response to the climate emergency. That's really valuing and designing for nature. And this is a street example, but the same holds true for property development. In this example, residents get essential nature services where they live and work, and where negative outcomes like urban heat island effect and poor air quality would otherwise be much more prevalent. So to paraphrase former City Commissioner Nick Fish, rather than nature in the city, we need a city in nature. So thanks for your attention. And as Michelle said, this is a smorgasbord approach. So Parks is happy to come back and talk to you further about these things in the future if you'd like.
Great. Thanks, Jen. So it sounds like maybe Nishant is back on. So Nishant, if you want to jump in, I will go back to your slides.
Okay, thank you. I apologize everyone for that. I had to do a hard restart and of course everything worked. So I'll just go ahead here at BES. We've been talking about climate change for a long time, and for the services we provide, some of the bigger concerns for climate change include various types of flooding, sewage overflows, loss of culturally significant species, and impacts to watershed health and community livability. Next slide, please, Michelle. We completed a climate resilience plan in 2019 that captures some of the content I'll be discussing. But that project, it did confirm that much of the work we've done historically, it should continue because its benefits are evident. And I think Jen and some of the other presenters already captured that really well. And that report also captures some of the new work that we should do and explore. We noted that certain BES services are more vulnerable to many climate risks. So you can see water quality and watershed health are sensitive to a lot of different hazards, while there are certain hazards that tend to impact all across our system and services. Next slide, please. We already heard a little bit about the benefits of green infrastructure. I think for a lot of our work in that realm, Green Street Planters, Eco Roofs will continue to do that work. Our tree program has been pretty successful. Planted more than 50,000 trees throughout Portland, about 9,000 in East Portland, partnering with Friends of Trees and others and the local communities. So that type of work will continue, but it is a little bit about how we do that work and how our green infrastructure may have to adapt in the future. So for example, our revegetation team, they're ensuring that new plantings have good plant species diversity, being extra careful about where we plant species known to be susceptible to changes in temperature and drought, and then favoring species known to be tolerant of a wider range of conditions. And we're also exploring sourcing some Portland native species from seed sources further south or east, where those genotypes adapted to hotter and drier conditions. So there's a lot we are exploring. We're continuing our invasive species work, recognizing its benefits in mitigating wildfire risk and managing ecologically healthy natural areas. We've invested a lot in strategic acquisitions of sites that help mitigate climate hazard impacts, meet regulatory goals, and help achieve watershed health goals. So our Greater Greenland acquisition program that helped purchase and restore 500 acres of natural area. That work will continue with the Watershed Land Acquisition Program, which has about $10 million of funding. Another example is our Johnson Creek Willing Cellar Program. That helps address flood-prone properties along the Johnson Creek main stem by increasing flood storage, improving fish and wildlife habitat, and restoring wetlands, but also by building resilience to temperature increases and differing flood patterns. In 2015, BES also implemented its first comprehensive program to inventory and assess all public and private wetlands. And so we're working with BPS to integrate these map to wetlands into the E-zone map correction project in order to protect those wetlands regardless of size. Next slide, please. And I just thought I'd highlight this one project which exemplifies, hopefully successful work we can do in the future. This is the Crystal Springs Creek project, which is a success story for climate resilience. Crystal Springs Creek is a cold water tributary to Johnson Creek, where restoration helped reduce stream temperatures by 3 degrees Celsius and improve salmon habitat. The project involved over 21 partners, including Urban Native American Community, the Grand Ronde Tribe, and Columbia Intertribal Fish Commission. It was also designated a salmon sanctuary. And it was also a global finalist for the 2019 C40 Cities Bloomberg Philanthropies Award. So we hope to repeat successes like this in the future. Next slide, please, Michelle. And then for our built system, our stormwater and combined sanitary infrastructure, the stormwater management will be increasingly important in the future. We've started to modify our pipe designs based on future storm and combined sanitary capacity concerns. We're using continuous simulation of rainfall events and stress testing of design storms to better understand the tipping points of our system and how sensitive our basins are to different rain events. We've also included various climate risks such as landslide and local flooding into our asset management business process. So we're just ingraining climate risk analysis into our business processes. And then for our facilities and other assets, we've provided best practice design guidelines from various municipalities, the EPA, and professional organizations on what water, wastewater utilities can do to mitigate or adapt to various climate change hazards, such as flood proofing pump stations, for example. Next slide, please. And then as noted by many of the other presenters, we recognize the disproportionate impact of climate change to BIPOC communities and other historically underserved communities, and recognize that equity, climate justice, social justice, cultural resilience are all closely linked. So we will continue to include an equity lens in our climate work going forward, and continue to engage and partner with historically underserved communities, as we believe knowledge sharing and education are important to building that intergenerational equity and resilience. One example of this, we are working with Native American communities to integrate indigenous traditional ecological knowledge, ITEC, into wetland improvement projects in the Columbia Slough, with the primary goal of creating resilient and safe locations for gathering first foods and plants. So we hope to expand the use of ITEC across a number of restoration projects. We also have a number of community education projects, such as our programs, such as the Clean Rivers Education Program, the Community Watershed Stewardship Program, which shares knowledge on climate science and the value of healthy watersheds for purposes of achieving climate resilience. Next slide, please. And then this is just a note again, what Jenna and Michelle already alluded to. It's by having that localized data on understanding our climate risks, as well as understanding what our communities need, where they're located, and what their characteristics are, that really will inform how we prioritize our adaptation work moving in the future. And so, you know, just as we noted about the tree program, we're able to look at low canopy, low income and BIPOC neighborhoods and start free tree neighborhood programs where we have the information to do so appropriately. So, and then also on that note, we also recognize that improving certain services in areas can contribute to gentrification and displacement of residents. So we are trying to understand what BES can do within our scope of authority and services to better understand those issues. We have 2 studies in progress, one with Eco Northwest and one with Dogami, in understanding how to mitigate, to understand what the economic displacement impacts are, and then also what are our options to mitigate that. Next slide, please. And then this is just my final slide, just trying to stay on top of all of the information that's constantly changing. We have a lot of collaborations, University of Washington, for example, to get future projection, rainfall data on an hourly scale to better understand the regional impacts. Portland State University, we've benefited a lot from their resources and their research, especially the Institute of Sustainable Solutions. Green Infrastructure Leadership Exchange just started a climate change subcommittee. So we are members of that. We presented at C40 Urban Flood Network, sharing what we've learned so that we can benefit from other agencies. And so with that, apologies again for the fumbled start, but thank you for your time.
Great, thanks, Nishant. And Jana, you've been having internet issues as well. Are you on?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, this is Jonna. Yeah, you can? Okay, awesome. I'm kind of flying blind. Hi, this is Jonna Pop FMU. I work at the Bureau of Emergency Management. We don't get to present to Planning Commission very often, so I'm not sure I've met all of you. And I am actually probably the only person who's actually still coming to work every day in an office at the city's Emergency Coordination Center, where of course the internet is having intermittent service today. So I can't see my own slides, but I'm going to trust that you all can see my first slide that says disaster resilient communities on it. It's got some pictures. Yep. Okay, awesome. Thanks. So Pbem is one of the city's smallest bureaus. I don't know if Planning Commission thinks of us very often, although you may have thought of us more often in the last few months than you did for many years previous to that. The mission of Pbem is to build a disaster resilient Portland. That is 100% our focus. And we know that in an emergency, 95% of the people who are rescued from a disaster, who are actually pulled from the floodwaters, dug from the rubble, that survive because of the help of others, are rescued rescued by their neighbors and not by professional responders. So what that tells us is that social capital and that connection between neighbors is a critical component of disaster resilience. And likewise, measures of social capital are actually an excellent measure of long-term recovery prospects because they're what draw people back to neighborhoods or cause people to stay in cities through hardship. So in a lot of ways, we see that the best thing we can do to build disaster resilience in Portland is to build strong relationships among Portlanders. We also see very much that the same communities get hit first and worst in every disaster. And those are the same communities we've been talking about: Black communities, Indigenous communities, other communities of color, immigrants and refugees, and people with disabilities. And so at Pbem, we seek to center our work in service to the communities that are most impacted by disaster. And in doing that, we work in partnership with communities. And I want to mention we've worked much in partnership with the other bureaus that have presented today, and also with Civic Life and with Portland Fire and Rescue, who have been great partners to us. Can you advance the slide?
Okay, it's done.
Thanks. So community partnerships. A big part of the work we do in community to advance disaster resilience is we teach classes on first aid, disaster preparedness, know your hazards, how to non-structural fixes that you can do in your home. And we teach those classes in partnership with community-based organizations. We have a model where we pay the community-based organization to host the class for us, to recruit the participants. They provide food, childcare, and translation, and we pay them for that. And then we also provide material support to the participants that come to the class. Usually we give them either a first aid kit or sometimes gift cards to purchase preparedness supplies, or we've done other like water storage bottles, stuff like that. When we partner with the CBO, we usually start we come to a staff meeting and do a training with their staff so that they are also familiar with the material that we're teaching to their program participants. And when we teach from a textbook that's actually written by community groups. We entered into a contract with Latino Network, Urban League, Apano, and VOS, and we, as a group writing exercise, which was a tremendous learning experience for us all, we wrote the textbook that we use to talk about disaster preparedness. That I feel like the work that we've done in those community partnerships, I'll just add, we're seeing a really big payoff for right now as we're working into the current pandemic emergency, because we're currently providing a lot of direct service to community members through the same community-based organizations. So we're providing diapers, cleaning supplies, weekly food boxes that are getting distributed through Urban League, through Latino Network, through those same community organizations that we had been in partnership with previous to this to teach the classes. And also we've seen a tremendous interest from other small community groups that want to work with us. So I'm hopeful that this effort is something that will, as we someday eventually move out of this pandemic and back into a more normal work pattern, that that the work we're doing now will roll right back into those working in partnership with community. So that's one important element of our work. And then the other part I talk about is about the Community Resilience District concept. And this builds on the Neighborhood Emergency Team volunteer program that some folks here, I know at least a few folks are familiar with. I'm proud that Portland has the largest network of community emergency response volunteers in the entire United States. It's a federal program, and we have more than 2,000 active responders. That's bigger than New York or San Francisco or other big cities. The demographic of that volunteer base is perhaps predictably, it's predominantly white and middle class, because it's folks who are making a big donation to the city, really, of their time and resources to participate in the group, for which we're very grateful. Our neighborhood emergency teams are neighborhood-based, and they have expressed desire to us to be have greater opportunity for participation, including among community members for whom the direct, first aid response may not be the role that they want to play or is appropriate for them, who may not have the time and resources to make a big commitment of monthly meetings and 30 hours of classroom training. And so we're transitioning the neighborhood emergency teams into something we're calling community resilience districts. which means that a net team gets together and writes a charter that affirms their neighborhood-specific goals that must include a goal around inclusion and equity, but also include, recognizing the hazards and the needs in their neighborhood, whether it's landslides or flooding or hazmat facility. And then they create roles for themselves in a disaster and plan out their response, but also roles for people who wouldn't do first aid, search and rescue type stuff, but might do childcare, might provide mental health, compassionate listening, things like that. And then they launched their community resilience district in a neighborhood. We were just set to launch pilots in downtown and St. John's as the current pandemic hit. And in fact, the last time our bureau was all together, we did a 3-day training on collaborative leadership with a really neat woman named Starhawk, who flew into town and taught that class for us for 3 days. And then that work hasn't been able to continue in person. But we have been meeting with the Nets every week during the current pandemic on the phone. They've contributed to disaster response in a lot of other ways, including helping us deliver food boxes and supplies like that. And so we're looking forward to coming back to this as we move back out into interacting more with our neighbors. So those are the two main things I wanted to talk to you about just in terms of building community resilience and the role of our Bureau. And that's my last slide. Thanks.
All right. Great. Thank you, Donna. And thank you all to all of our Bureau presenters. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen now. And we have just a few minutes left. So I just wanted to turn it back over to you, Eli, to see if there's any questions or comments or discussion.
I'm sorry, I had myself muted. Chris and then Mike have questions. So Chris.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the information. So Pbem was not on the smorgasbord today, but I could see lots of things in here that might impact the transportation system. Landslides and floods can close roads. Extreme heat events tend to affect the catenary wires for MAX. I know in my tenure on the streetcar board, we've had to specify beefier air conditioning systems for the vehicles. Do we have any kind of comprehensive look about risk to the transportation system from all of this?
So the Bureau of Transportation has been an active participant particularly in that DRAG group, that multi-bureau group looking at disaster resilience and recovery. And so they are definitely part of the conversation. I think they, as you all know, sort of struggle in terms of resources and their ability to sort of address the sort of issues right in front of them. And so doing this longer term planning is just sort of difficult to do when they're so resource constrained, but they have been participating and have also been benefiting from the partnership with Portland State University that some of the other presenters talked about in terms of getting interns and others to help them build that capacity. So they weren't here today, but they are part of the work. I think you're right, though, that there are some significant impacts to transportation infrastructure, particularly both related to heat as well as flooding and landslides, that remains something that they continue to try to make work on. I think a lot of their focus recently in this space has been around those emergency transportation routes and really trying to identify what the critical infrastructure is for them. And then also working with all of these other bureaus to identify those linkages. So for example, if the Bureau of Environmental Services has a pump station, which is a critical piece of infrastructure for them in the event of a natural hazard, but the road to get to that pump station is not on PBOT's list of things to fix quickly, then that's not going to work very well. So that's part of that governance and decision-making collaboration structure we're trying to develop in order to be able to advance those sorts of linkages as well. That's a good question, though, Chris.
Thanks.
Chris, I might just add there that I do know that PBOT has requested funding for a resilience master plan for a couple of years now, and I think I'm not sure what the current most recent status of that is, but I know they've been trying to get that off the road.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I could add to that, Chris, this is Jen Cairo, that PBOT is working on street design with all the infrastructure bureaus and with parks in specific in regards to street trees and space for those increasingly in the future.
I'm going to go to Mike and then to Katie, and anyone else, please raise your hand now so I can get to you, but we're don't have a lot of time for questions. So Mike.
Okay, well, more of an observation, I guess, then. Michelle, thank you. As you noted, we went back and forth for several years there trying to get beyond mitigation and into adaptation. And the creation of the climate preparation strategies, I think, was a huge leap forward and integrating it in the climate action plan. We're very grateful for the work the city has done. We got the note from you, you're off onto new adventures. And I wanted to thank you profusely and hope you have a great next adventure in your life. I was most interested in drag. I personally would be very interested in interacting with that group. And I, as a PSC member, would be happy to participate in your meetings where that's appropriate. Because one of the biggest issues from my perspective, and actually from the colleagues that I work with as well, is getting beyond what we've referred to for many years as the siloing of the bureaus. And this seems like a great example of breaking those silos down. And the only way we're going to deal with adapting and mitigating the climate change is through an all hands on deck integrated approach. And I will say I signed up for NET. I've not attended a meeting, but I live in a fourplex and we have 2 very active members of the NET program.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Katie.
Yes. My husband's a NET, so I was really interested in that part of this. All of these presentations were wonderful, and I so appreciate you bringing all this great information. I wanted to ask about the Columbia River levee, and I know that the Army Corps of Engineers is doing some work on that, and I was wondering, does anyone know how Portland is involved in that process? And I'd heard that it was perhaps not being done in the most progressive way possible. And so I just wanted to find out how Portland was involved in that.
Vita or Nishant, maybe?
I probably don't have as good information. I know we were trying to submit funding, and I think it was going to be joint research with the Army Corps, and I thought PSU on understanding what the future river elevations might be and their impact on the levees. But I don't think that's been approved or going forward yet. So that's all I know, but I feel like Kavita might be able to.
Well, all I was going to say, so I don't know, there might be 2 questions in there. I can only answer the question related to the climate aspect of it. There is a project called Levee Ready Columbia looking at the recertification, I think, of those levees.
Yes.
So I'm not the right person to talk to about that. Unfortunately, that's a separate, process. It's related, but if you're asking a question on climate impacts and the levees,
not really. I wanted to, in a way, I thought this would be just a good group to ask this question of, which is who at the city of Portland is working with the Army Corps of Engineers.
Right. So Multnomah County Drainage District worked with the Army Corps to conduct a study looking at the levees and exposure to future river levels with climate change. So the drainage districts have been involved in that, but other bureaus like Bureau of Environmental Services are involved in the Levee Ready Columbia project. And our bureaus are familiar with the study that was just released by the Army Corps of Engineers and the USGS on the Columbia River future climate projections. The reason the Water Bureau is interested is because our groundwater supply is located along the Columbia River. So we are very interested in reducing risk of exposure from future flooding. Obviously, the BES wastewater plant and other assets are also located in that area, as well as other City of Portland assets. So there are people involved in different bureaus in the Levee Ready Columbia projects.
Thank you. Ben.
Yeah, a quick comment and perhaps a question. I was really glad to see the work done as part of BHC, Better Housing by Design, for heat island effect, kind of comparing different scenarios on a block. I actually happened to see a presentation by Professors Vivek Chandas last week of that same thing, kind of going really in depth, and actually I found that very informative. But a question perhaps for Nishant. I'm not sure if I'm reading the urban heat island map correctly. It appeared to me that the river, the Willamette, seems to be seem to be like a higher temperature kind of area. So I'm wondering if I'm reading that incorrectly, and I would kind of perhaps broadly, if you can answer about what the overall effect of a river is. I would assume that has a cooling effect.
Thank you. Michelle?
I don't know if that's.
Do you want me to try?
It was one of the last slides that you had.
Yeah.
I think it was the second to last slide.
I think that is more of so the areas around the rivers are often, for many of the areas, are industrial areas where there's a lot of pavement, and so that's part of the reason why you see some of the hotter temperatures in those industrial areas. And then I think the river is read often in some of those images just more a function of sort of the way that the modeling happens and the way that they take those temperature readings. And so they're collecting those temperature readings sort of on hard surface. They're not out in the middle of the river taking that. And so I think the modeling software that they use just sort of like interpolates between the two, and you end up with a hot river. But the areas around many of those river areas where there are those industrial areas with lots of pavement, big buildings, not a lot of green infrastructure, do tend to be the hotter areas as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for this presentation. I'm going to say to Michelle, thank you. It's been a critically important time in your job, and intense one too. So I hope you get a little break here, and that it's good to see so many people with you doing the work in addition. So I'll keep going.
Great. And in the future, even though I'm not going to be here, any of these folks would be more than happy to come back and talk to you more about the work that they're doing, which is all pretty exciting. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. So with that, we're going to shift to our last topic for today's meeting, which will be with Sally and Mindy for the E-Zone Map Correction Project. This is a new project in front of the PSC. We start off with a briefing, and I've not heard of any conflicts of interest. So if anyone has property in an E-Zone you haven't mentioned already, please raise your hand virtually. Not seeing any, we will say that we have no conflicts of interest on this, which makes it nice and easy. And I will hand it over to Mindy. Are we going to take the lead on this?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to try to share my screen here.
And while Mindy's doing that, they're going to have a presentation. About 2/3 of the presentation, they'll have a chance for us to do question and answer. Then they're going to give us the rest of the presentation, and we'll still have some more question and answer at the end. So that's the program we're doing here.
Hopefully everyone can see my screen that I'm sharing here. Little thumbs up if you can see my PowerPoint. Yay. Okay, great. So my name is Mindy Brooks. I am with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and I'm joined today by Daniel Subbing, who will be giving a portion of this presentation about the environmental overlay zones. There we go. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge that this has been a 2-year joint effort with dozens of staff from the Bureaus of Planning and Sustainability, Environmental Services, Development Services, and Portland Parks and Rec. We have representatives from each bureau here today to answer specific questions if needed. We've also had a lot of response to this project, and I want to acknowledge the over 400 property owners who have invited us onto their property, and the over 200 people who have participated in the event over the past 2 years. Before we get started, I'm sorry, we'll move on to my next slide. The presentation is going to cover a number of topics. We have about an hour for this presentation. We're only going to talk for about 30 minutes out of it, but we're going to pause about 2/3 through, as Eli said, when we're talking about how the E-zones impact properties, and allow for a pause and get some Q&A in there, and then we'll come back and finish out the presentation. So let's start with just a big overview of the project, and then we will dive into the details. The purpose of the environmental overlay zones is to protect the existing streams, wetlands, flood areas, steep slopes, forests, and wildlife habitat, and to protect homes and businesses from risks like landslides and flood and heat island, just like you heard about. So this is about protecting existing natural resources. The purpose of the project is to make sure that the zones actually align with the resources. And this project is needed because the overlay zones were applied in the 1990s for the most part, and since then technology has improved a lot. we find that the resources we intended to protect are not always protected, so we're fixing that. Many of you may not be familiar with the environmental overlay zones, or E-zones as we call them. The E-zones are a zoning tool with the official zoning maps and regulations in Title 33. There are two types of environmental overlay zones corrected by this project: the conservation and protection. The conservation zone, or C zone, applies to natural resources that are important, but where we do expect new development. And the protection zone, or P zone, applies to critical resources where development should be avoided, except for under special circumstances. A couple things to know: the environmental zones, the conservation and protection zone. There are required setbacks from streams and wetlands, but in both zones, you can maintain or repair your existing house, driveway, and deck. You can maintain your existing yard and fence, and you can remove trees that are dead, dying, and dangerous, or trees near your house, but tree replacement is required. That was just a high-level summary of the project. I'm going to get into the details now. So Portland started to protect natural resources using overlay zones about 30 years ago. It's important to understand the fundamental reasons why we use a zoning tool to protect the resources and why we are updating them today. So the environmental overlay zones were applied to reduce the risk of flood damage and landslides by limiting new development in high-risk areas, to protect streams and wetlands, which are a natural infrastructure that storms and moves stormwater, and to protect fish and wildlife habitat, including habitat for endangered species. And all of this helps maintain public health benefits of nature in the city, such as cool air temperatures. The purpose of this project is really, really simple at the core of it. We're correcting the location of the zone boundaries to better align with the natural resources. And the scope of the project is pretty narrow too. So the primary output that you're going to be considering are amendments to the official zoning maps to correct those zone boundaries. And there are some code clarifications. There is a lot of detail, a lot of data about the natural resources that are included in the reports. It's also important to know that as part of this project, we are not proposing to make policy changes. So we're not changing what should or shouldn't be protected. We're only correcting the overlay zones to align with the resources. This project is part of implementing the 2035 Comprehensive Plan, which specifically calls for the city to maintain natural resource inventory and to keep our natural resource protection programs up to date. So the overlay zones are a tool, like I said, that have been in use for a long time. We first applied the overlay zones in 1989 in the Columbia Slough, and over the next 20 years, we applied the overlay zones throughout all of Portland. In total, there are 12 plans that were adopted by 2002. Each of those plans say which resources are intended to be protected, and we're not changing that intent. We're just correcting the overlay zones to match the intent. The reason this project is needed is because in 2012, we updated the citywide natural resource inventory using new technology. What we found is that a lot of the resources that were supposed to be protected aren't. This is an example of a stream that's not protected. There are also areas with E-zones, but no resources, and we're fixing those too. This is the project area where the proposed corrections to the environmental overlay zones are occurring. The two areas circled in red, the Columbia Corridor and the Willamette River, are not part of this project. The Willamette River's environmental overlay zones are being updated through the river plan. The South Reach is underway now. You guys just heard all about the South Reach in your last meetings. And the Columbia Corridor will be updated through the Economic Opportunity Analysis Project, anticipated in the next year or two. So Portland's natural topography has a lot to do with which areas of the city get environmental overlay zones. The West Hills are very steep and they're forested. The forests are shown in dark green on the screen. And Johnson Creek is habitat for salmon and subject to frequent flooding. But there's a big area in North, Northeast, and East Portland that, besides the buttes, has very little existing resources. And that isn't because there were never resources there. It's because we harvested the trees and buried the wetlands and streams to make way for development. But trees and streams are an amenity that people enjoy, and natural resources tend to raise property value. So over time, we've seen wealthy, mostly white people investing and moving into areas with remaining natural resources, and people of color being pushed into areas where the resources were removed or into areas with higher risk. You guys have seen this map a lot. I'm showing it again. It's a really important story that we need to understand. These resources do impact the people living and working in Portland. This again is the Heat Island map. And where the forest was in that previous map, where the green was in the previous map, that's where it's blue, indicating a cooler air temperature. And where there was little or no forest in the last map is yellow or red, indicating hotter temperatures. And this has a direct impact on health. In 2008, a report showed
Indy, we're not seeing that new map.
Yeah, the map is not up.
Related complications than from any other natural hazard that year. And I'm just relaying this because E-zones are about protecting existing natural resources, and that's what they're about, but it's just part of the story. You heard a lot previously about all the other important things that need to be done to increase natural amenities throughout the city. And I just wanted you to keep that in mind.
Mindy?
Mindy.
The map you're describing is not up.
Sorry.
There you go.
Sorry, my map didn't advance. Thank you. Here's the Heat Island map. You guys have seen it a lot, thankfully, so you were able to imagine it as I was talking about it. But again, the blue corresponds with the forest canopy in almost throughout all of the city, and where there is no forest, it's red. There we go. Now we're back advancing. In total, the environmental overlay zones are being corrected on approximately 17,000 properties in the project area. The vast majority of the corrections look like this. The solid brown is the existing conservation zone, and the solid green is the existing protection zone. Overall, most of the changes are very minor to the edges of the overlay zones, and they're intended to follow tree canopy or follow streams and wetlands. This table is the summary of the changes. Across the entire project area, there's about a 4% increase, about 600 acres of additional coverage of overlay zones. But I want to highlight a big change. So while the change is only 4% across the project area, the area of protection zone, or the higher restricted zone, has an increase of about 1,200 more acres in the project area. And this is because of a change that we're seeing across the board, and this is a good example of it. In the 1990s, we did not have the ability to map all the stream corridors. The technology just didn't exist outside of having access to everyone's private property. Through aerials, we could tell where streams likely were because of tree canopy and topography. And we ended up putting a conservation zone in those areas. But if we could have verified the streams were there, we would have applied a protection zone. Today, our satellite imagery allows us to much more accurately map the streams, and we are applying a protection zone to those streams, which means generally a change from conservation to protection zone for the stream and the land within 50 feet. Okay, so what does this all mean? What does this really mean for people? So I'm going to get into an example, and after I go through this example, this is where we're going to pause for a little break, and you can ask some questions. So this is a typical residential house and yard. It's located near a stream and near a flood area. The environmental overlay zone is shown as a dark black dashed line. The overlay zone runs through the yard and part of the house. This is very typical because we build our buildings close to resources. The house, yard, fence, swing set, garden, it can all remain. It can be maintained and repaired, and in most cases, it can just be replaced within its current footprint. The overlay zones are intended to limit new development, such as adding a room closer to the stream. A few other things explained on this diagram. The entire floodplain in Portland is regulated. Some of the floodplain is in an environmental overlay zone. Typically, that floodplain that is near to streams and wetlands has an overlay zone applied to it. floodplain that might be further from a stream or wetland and largely developed, such as what you see in Lentz, is typically not in an E zone, but it is regulated by Title 24. Similarly, trees both in and outside the E zone are regulated. Generally, native trees cannot be removed unless if it's through a proposed development. However, dead, dying, and dangerous trees or trees within 10 feet of a structure can be removed. Replacement is required. Inside the overlay zone, trees 6 inches in diameter or larger must be replaced. Outside the overlay zone on private property, replacement is not required until the tree is at 12 inches in diameter. So I'm going to pause here because I just gave you guys a lot of information. So we'll just take a quick 5-minute pause for clarifying questions, and then we'll continue on.
I'm not sure if I have a question exactly, but I was wondering, this is Katie, and I was wondering how much of this information on this slide, which is all questions I had when I was reading your report. I was reading the report and I was reading the comments that people had sent in. And I was like, well, yeah, that seems kind of odd that it's going across the driveway or it's going across their house. And there's a lot of sarcasm about it. And so I was just wondering how, because it's almost like when you read the report, it's like you're looking through a telescope from the back end. And in terms of if you're a homeowner, the homeowner cares about their home and their property and the impact it's going to have on their home and property. And so this slide seems to be a slide that would really help homeowners know what the impact would be on their property. Does that make sense?
This diagram is available on our website. This one and one that's also a business-oriented diagram are both available on our website as a PDF that you can print out. And we send this one out a lot to folks when we talk to them on the phone or get emails from people.
Okay, well, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Eli, you're on mute.
Mike, would you like to have a question?
Just an observation. Number one, I'm very pleased that we're not talking about policy here. We're talking about minor adjustments over the landscape. And I'll just say that having started doing these inventories 37 years ago with a grant from the State Fish and Wildlife, there has been improvements over that 37 years, including in the city of Portland. We started out with literally paper maps that we just drew lines around resources that, back in the day, and that it's not unusual to need to do this kind of adjustment over time as LiDAR comes on and other technologies that allow us to be much more precise. So I'm very supportive of this project, specifically because it is minor changes and not related to policy changes.
Jeff.
Yeah, I am. Thank you. For right now, Minnie, just 2 quick questions. You mentioned 1,200 acres of additional P zone. How many properties does that affect, and what percentage of those are residential?
That's a great question. I don't have the numbers specifically in front of me. I will bring that back to you at the next presentation to give you the exact number of how many properties are impacted within that. It does include like Forest Park. So there are big public properties that are part of this project as well. So I can break those numbers down for you and bring it back.
I'm really interested in the individual homeowner kind of property, and because I'm assuming that's the majority of it. And then the other question I had, you mentioned that streams is kind of a main focus. That's where you use LiDAR and you were better able to identify stream corridors. Is there, and I thought I read this somewhere and I can't find it now, but is there a differentiation between what a stream is and what an open drainage ditch is, or how do you how did you differentiate, or did they all become P zones?
And that's a great question. There is a differentiation. The environmental overlay zones are intended to be applied to streams that would be considered perennial streams or intermittent streams, meaning that they will flow for weeks to months during the winter or all the time. There are just plain drainages where water flows for hours to maybe days after a rain event. Those are typically not in an environmental overlay zone. However, they are part of our stormwater infrastructure system. And so even those smaller drainages that don't get an E-zone are still part of the drainageway administrative rule because we need to make sure water moves around. But once you get to a point where you're seeing water for weeks to months in the winter, then it's probably going to have an environmental overlay zone.
And that analysis would be somewhere in the records of this, how you determine a given drainage canal qualified as P zone versus not.
Yeah, so there's one of the appendices to the natural resources inventory is the actual work that was done to remap the streams for 2012. And so it's a GIS exercise that looks at drainage basins and catch basins. We then verify that using BES's, Bureau of Environmental Services, stormwater infrastructure and stream infrastructure data, and then further verify it through on-site investigation and verification when we are invited on private property.
And when you determine that it needs overlay zone, was it always P, or in some cases could those drainage canals be a C?
The direction from all those 12 previous plans, the policy is always to apply a protection overlay zone to streams and wetlands. And there are very, very few exceptions to it. I'd have to go back and look and see if there are any exceptions to it, and we could bring that back if there are a few exceptions, but it's almost unanimously across the board.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Not seeing any more questions. I've got a couple, but they might you might cover it in your next part of your presentation, so I'll wait. So let's keep going. Thanks, Mindy.
Okay, great. We'll move on. So we talked about how these overlay zones impact existing development. So where you have a house or where you have a business already on the ground. But I wanted to go over how these overlay zones impact an undeveloped piece of property because we do have those out there. So the standards in Title 33 are intended to accommodate new development. This is an example of an undeveloped lot. It's zoned R7. It's on a slope that's treed, and those resources are on a conservation or C zone that's depicted by the yellow line. The zoning code would allow for 3,500 square feet of disturbance. Disturbance means house, driveway, deck, yard, fence, all of that together, all those disturbed areas is the footprint that needs to be under 3,500 square feet. And this is an example of how the site might be developed. So the footprint of the house is 30 by 65 feet. Keep in mind that we're just looking at the footprint here. This house could be 2 or 3 stories tall, depending on what the base zone and height limits allow. If you add in then the deck and driveway, the total impacts within the C zone are 2,346 square feet, well underneath the allowed limits. There were 3 trees removed in this example, and so those would need to be replaced on the site. So this is an example of a situation where the conservation zone applies to most of the site. And in that situation, there's development that's allowed. But we're going to go into a more difficult situation next where the protection overlay zone applies to most of the site. And that protection zone is much more restricted. And I'm going to turn this over to Daniel to explain how we handled that situation.
Thank you, Mindy. I'm Daniel Sobing. Most of you have not met me before. I work with Mindy at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and I'm project staff along with Mindy on this project. So in this example, we have a lot that has a lot of protection overlays on it. So sometimes our proposed map correction results in a protection overlay zone that covers most of the site. And it's important to make sure that the overlay zones don't preclude reasonable development. So we looked at all sites where the protection zone covers 70% or more of the site. And on sites where it was appropriate or feasible, we converted a portion of the P zone to C zone. The area that we chose to convert needed to be as far as possible from streams and wetlands, and also located as far as possible. On this example, yeah, so there's an example right here in green. And in this example, the protection zone extends 50 feet from the stream in all directions. And based on our preliminary map correction, there's not enough space anywhere on the lot outside of the protection zone to create a building site. Mindy, could you advance to the next slide, please? So to create a building site, a portion of the protection zone is converted into the conservation zone in the lower left-hand corner. The potential building site includes some area of conservation zone and some area that is totally outside of the overlay. And this whole area should be buildable through the general development standards. Selection of conversion sites prioritize proximity to the road and to other utilities. If development results in impacts to natural resources that are located in the conservation zone, such as the removal of trees, like in the example, mitigation would be required. There are over 100 lots around Portland where we are proposing a conversion from protection to conservation zone to allow for development to happen on those sites. I'm going to turn it back over to Mindy now.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. I'm going to jump back in and talk about two of the biggest changes that are coming with this project. And one of them has to do with streams. So those, we talked about this a couple of times, and Mike really said it really well. Those original plans in the 90s, they were done using technology that's not the same as we have today. But they did call for applying a protection overlay zone to streams and wetlands in most cases, and the land within about 50 feet in most cases as well. In 2012, when we adopted the natural resources inventory, the citywide inventory, we mapped about 180 miles of existing streams that were not previously mapped. And we're now adding protection zone to all of them. Many of them are already in a conservation zone, so it's a switch from conservation to protection zone. But there are some streams that were never mapped and never had overlay zones, and so this is brand new for those properties. Another big change has to do with wetlands. So in the 90s, we relied heavily on the national wetlands inventory and a little bit of local data to map wetlands, but we missed a lot. However, if a wetland was mapped, it generally had a protection zone applied to it. Concurrent with this project, the Bureau of Environmental Services is doing the wetland inventory project. They are following the DSL and Army Corps of Engineer methodologies and protocols to map wetlands throughout all of Portland. To date, the result is about 130 acres of wetlands are being mapped. It's important to note that those are throughout all of Portland, and a lot of them are actually in the Columbia Corridor, which is part of a future project, not part of this project. But for those wetlands that are in this project area, we're proposing that protection overlay zone be applied. BES is offering free wetland determinations for any property owner who would like to have their wetlands verified on site. Let's talk about public engagement. As I mentioned, approximately 17,000 properties are impacted by this project, so we prioritize engagement from the beginning. The priority has been to make sure that every impacted property owner knows about the project and has the opportunity to engage. The project began in June of 2018, and in just the last 2 years, we've done multiple mailings to all project properties. We've attended 36 neighborhood meetings, and we've held a total of 9 project events within the community. The November 2019 mailing about the discussion draft not only went to property owners, but we also sent postcards to all property addresses so that renters would also know about this project. But one of the most important parts of this project has been performing the site visits, and I'm going to turn it back over to Daniel, who was the lead on the site visit work.
Thank you again, Mindy. So as Mindy said, a big focus of all of our public outreach and engagement has been to encourage people to request site visits. Starting in July of 2018, the eZone Map app has included a feature that allowed property owners to request online. We also emphasize the availability of site visits in all of the mailings that Mindy mentioned, all the presentations that we've given to neighborhood associations and other groups. Site visits are a critical part of the project because most of the data that underlies the map corrections comes from remote sensing. And while aerial imagery and LiDAR allow us to map natural resources like forest canopy and location of stream beds in greater detail than we could 20 or 30 years ago, it's critical to get boots on the ground to verify the data in a natural resource. Mindy, could you advance the slide, please? So to date, we performed roughly 400 site visits, and we have a bunch more on the schedule. We're scheduling more every day. This map shows the distribution of site visits that we've already completed. You can see that there's a big concentration in the West Hills where the majority of the environmental overlays are, but we've also been up in the Blue. We've been all throughout the Johnson Creek watershed and some other areas southeast and northeast Portland. With the exception of a handful of site visits that we conducted at parks and other public properties, all of these site visits were conducted at the request of the homeowners. So property owners contacted us either through the map app, or they called us or contacted us through email and asked us to come on their property. Mindy, could you advance the slide, please? So nearly every site visit that we conduct results in some kind of modification to the map resource. Most of the changes that we make are relatively small modifications to the mapping of forest vegetation. So on a typical site visit, staff will make adjustments to better follow the drip line of the tree canopy, or they'll make judgment calls to determine if a tree or a small grove of trees is contiguous to a stream or to a larger patch of forest vegetation. But the biggest changes that we make are changes in the area of headwater streams. Headwaters are where streams start from a seaport where overland flow accumulates enough to form channels. In headwater areas, we try to map where the channel begins, and that can be fairly difficult to ascertain just looking at LiDAR data. Some streams inventory that are actually streams. And these are the areas where we have to apply that judgment call of, is this a drainage way or is this actually a stream? We'll, during the wet season, we'll look for flowing water. During the dry season, find beds and banks, riparian vegetation, things like that that can be strong indicators of whether or not what we're looking at is a drainage or actually a stream. In general, the mapping in the natural resource inventory is very good. It's highly unusual for field staff to make modifications to stream data at all. Most of the stream data has been vetted by the Bureau of Environmental Services, and they maintain comprehensive data about the stormwater infrastructure, stream infrastructure mentioned previously. But there have been a few occasions where staff located new streams that hadn't been mapped previously. And there have been other occasions where we've completely deleted streams from our inventory. And that most commonly occurs where there's a pipe in the place of a previously existing stream, and that pipe may not have been. Can we go on to the next slide, please? So site visits also give staff an opportunity to talk with property owners. Most property owners have questions and concerns about the implications of the overlays. But when we talk to them, the exemptions for existing development and for existing landscaped areas tend to alleviate most of the fears and concerns that they have. The general development standards that allow for new home construction on undeveloped lots in the conservation zone tend to satisfy most other. By the end of most site visits, most people come away with acceptance of the resource mapping methodology, and even quite a few individuals who have requested site visits have expressed gratitude that the city of Portland has protections for natural resources. Some people have even expressed a desire for more protections than what we're however, some site visits have definitely concluded less amicably. There have been heated discourse over the role of zoning and city government's control over land use and development in general. Of the people who were not okay with the proposal or with the E-zones, the main concerns that have been expressed so far are concerns that the overlay zones make it so people may not be able to expand their house in an area where they had hoped to. People are concerned that the overlay zones may make it difficult to subdivide property. And owners who were expecting property into multiple lots, fewer or smaller lots when they do go in for development. And there are concerns that overlay zones may impact the property value or the taxes. It may impact the ability of owners to sell in the future. And then I'm going to turn it back over to Mindy for the rest of the presentation.
Thank you. So that was a lot of information again. So I'm going to go back to the take-home messages because there's a lot here, but really at the heart of it, it's a simple project from a scope perspective. So I'm just going to read this. The purpose of the environmental overlay zones. The environmental overlay zones are intended to protect existing streams, wetlands, flood areas, steep slopes, forests, and wildlife habitat. Because the overlay zones were applied a long time ago, they don't always follow the actual resources, and this project is fixing that. There are two types of environmental overlay zones with this project. The conservation or C zone, which allows new development that's sensitive to natural resources, and the protection overlay zone, where new development is mostly not allowed. Some key points: you can maintain and repair your existing house, driveway, and deck. You can maintain your yard and your fence. You can remove dead, dying, and dangerous trees and trees near houses, and tree replacement is required.
Okay.
The project report is very big. It's 12 documents in all, and I just wanted to tell you what's in them really quick. So volume 1A is a summary of the project. It's a really good overarching description and summary of results. Volume 1B is the actual zoning code and map amendments. So that's the regulations that are changing. Volume 2, parts A through G, so there's a lot of these here, are all the natural resource data that backs this up. So there's a lot of reports with a lot of information. Volume 3 is a summary of the natural resource inventory methodology. That's where those descriptions, definitions, how we do the mapping lives. And volume 4 is the compliance report for regional and state laws. The other thing I want to point out is that for most people, the best way to find out what is happening on your property is through the eZone map app. So just going to the map app, putting in your address, you can then turn on and off the information. You can turn on and off existing and the proposed environmental overlay zones. You can also change what you see underneath. So you can turn on streams and wetlands and trees and see what is driving the overlay zone changes. And this will be my last slide, and then we'll be done and we can take more questions. This is the schedule. So on June 30th, we sent out the Measure 56 notice for the project. And of course, today we're doing the briefing. July 28th is the hearing where we're accepting public testimony. And then we have scheduled 2 work sessions, and we're hoping for a recommendation at the end of the second work session. Then we're hoping to head to City Council in the winter with adoption in the spring. And with that, I will conclude and just open it up to questions.
Thank you, Mindy. All right. Well, we've got a lineup already. Let's start with Mike, then Chris and Kat, and I'll get in line after Kat. So Mike.
Yeah, I think it's really appropriate that this presentation follows the one related to climate change, particularly adaptation, but also mitigation. So an important, huge element of this work, of course, is to address all of the issues that staff raised in the climate presentation with regard to impacts on natural and human systems. 2 points, I was really disappointed the Columbia Corridor wasn't included, and that is a result or related to the need to address the fact that there are a lot of wetlands out in the Columbia Corridor, and we've got good old Gold 9 raising its ugly head again. And we're gonna have to, we've been kicking that can down the road with regard to developable lands, and we gotta tackle that. And I think the city needs to challenge the state on the whole Gold 9 issue. We only have so much land. The second point is all of the discussion about urban heat island and the negative impacts from that on low-income communities as a result of lack of urban forest canopy points out that it's one thing which this project is focused on is protecting existing resources. What about the need to restore areas? And we're not going to do that through the land use program. I think it's going to have to be through the drag process where we bring all of the concepts that we heard about earlier together to talk about improving conditions both for nature and for people which of course are interrelated. And how we do that, I think, is going to be a very interesting conversation that the PSC needs to have with all the city bureaus in a sustainability context.
Thanks. Chris.
Yeah, I have two questions. Let me spit them both out and you can decide what order to answer them in. Reading the maps and the code, I was a little bit surprised to see there's also a scenic zone on the maps and some references to it in the code. What's the nexus between that zone and the E-zones, and why are they bundled together? And is any of that changing, or is that just staying the same? Second question is, how are we handling the testimony? Reading the testimony, I see kind of two big buckets. One bucket is people just saying, you're trampling my property rights, don't do it. The other is people who are in some way disputing the facts. You know, you're drawing the line too far away from the stream. Particularly interested in that second bucket, and how are you getting to a common understanding with property owners of what the facts are that are driving this?
Great, thank you. I will start with your first question about scenic resources. So this is, excuse me, so this is a complicated little issue that we have. The city applied environmental overlay zones first, and then we did our scenic work second. And the scenic work actually along Skyline and Terwilliger, those scenic corridors, requires tree preservation. And it's actually a stronger protection than the conservation zone. But it's not a stronger protection than the P zone, which requires stream setbacks. So when we applied these scenic overlay zones, which was done in the 90s, sort of mishmashed in with the overlay zones, the hierarchy was, if there was a conservation zone, but now it's in a scenic corridor, we keep the scenic, we remove the conservation, because that scenic has a tree preservation requirement. If it's in a scenic corridor, but it was a protection zone, we keep the protection zone because it has the setback from streams and wetlands. Now we fast forward to now, we're correcting all these C and P zones, and we're doing it in areas with the scenic as well. So now we've got to adjust the scenic to match that hierarchy of conservation and protection zones. So you're seeing corrections with the scenic that are intended to reflect the corrections to the conservation and protection zone. Does that make sense? It's pretty, I don't know, it's pretty mishmashy together.
So the only modifications to the scenic would be because the underlying E-zone changed, right? It's a second order effect only.
It is. It really is just a second order effect, but it does seem, it gets a little complicated on a property by property basis. The second question is about testimony. And so as you said, we kind of are getting two buckets in so far. One bucket is don't do the project, don't make changes to the overlay zones. And then the second one is disputing the underlying facts. The stream's not here, the wetland's not here, the tree canopy's not here. That second, under the underlying facts part, that's the whole point of this project. And so what we want is all of those people to invite us onto their site to do a site visit. And we are continuing, we're getting a lot of phone calls from the Measure 56, a lot of emails. People are asking us to come out, and we want to just keep coming out. And what we hope to do is do a whole bunch of these. Daniel's going to be very busy. We have an intern. She's going out with him. They are going to be very, very busy. But we hope by September 8th that we'll be able to present an amendments package to you that covers the vast majority of these requests for verifying underlying data. We're not going to get to everybody. People are going to hear about this later on. We're not probably going to be able to get to every single site. And so there will be another amendment package probably when we go to City Council that accounts for even more. But we usually find by the time we get on site, we are able to stand there with the property owner and verify where the features are on the site or in relationship to the site.
So it feels uncomfortable as a member of a hearing body to not being able to evaluate the correctness or value of the testimony. It seems like we have to rely on staff to do that. So how do we close the loop and figure out if staff and the property owner are now in alignment? Will there be some kind of report that tells us that, or?
Yes. So what we want to do is come back to you. We'll come back at the first work session and the second work session with all of the properties that we've been in contact with, all of the site visit work that we're doing. We'll give you a report out on all of that. And if we are unable to get to everybody, we will let you know who we're not getting to as well. So you'll have an opportunity to evaluate all of that that's coming forward through your work sessions.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go to Kat now, and then I'm going to take my question. And then after that, I've got Jeff, Katie, and Steph. So Kat.
Mine's hopefully quick. Question, Mindy, on the statements that you can remove trees, you can make changes to your landscaping. What's the process for doing that?
Sure, that's a great question. So some of that is exempt, what we call exempt from Title 33-430. So there's a whole code section on there that says if the tree is what we call dead, dying, and dangerous, meaning it's not just a dead snag somewhere, it's actually dangerous, and that'll need to be certified by an arborist, and it can be removed from within the environmental overlay zone. It's just exempt. You don't need to go through a permitting process for the environmental overlay zone. You do need to get a tree permit, however. So you do need to contact urban forestry and get a tree permit to take that tree down. True also for trees that are within 10 feet of structure. They're exempt from the environmental overlay zone, meaning you do not need to address any of the environmental overlay zone with it. Still need to get a tree permit. The exemptions also say that changes to existing landscaped areas, play areas, and gardens that are existing is also exempt, just exempt from the code. You don't need to come talk to us. If you want to make a larger yard, you want to expand a new disturbance area, can only be up to 500 square feet, and it needs to be set back from streams and wetlands. And the code has all that in there. So we can, if people want to know the specifics of it, we encourage them to call us. We can walk everybody through on their property exactly what would be exempt or what wouldn't be.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll chime in. I've not done a project in the city of Portland near a protected area for environmental reasons, but I have done in other jurisdictions, and I've had to hire consultants to do delineations of wetlands that could be relied on by Department of State Lands, Army Corps of Engineers, the local jurisdiction, even Department of Housing at the state to fund projects. I'm wondering whether these delineations the city's doing can be relied on by those entities. And if so, I can see why some residents would not want the city to do it because it would add more protections. But for others in development opportunities, it's a freebie. It's a gimme. The city's putting in their staff time to do this. So I'm sort of wondering, the locations where these might be needed are well-treed areas of the city that might be fairly well off. It's a lot of city staff time to go out to evaluate this. And I'm just wondering if there's any kind of a structure that could be so that those people who live in other parts of the city that are hotter and lower income don't end up bearing that cost through staffing. And perhaps there's some strategy where if it's going through redevelopment, there's a way to recapture the staff time it took to do that delineation that helped with the development in the first place.
Yeah, that's a great question. A little bit of that I'm going to have to talk with Environmental Services. They're the lead on the wetland project. But what I can relay to you is that the way that they're doing the wetland project is they're using DSL and Army Corps' wetland determination methodology that allows for determinations to be done using off-site determinations. And so they use a whole suite of technology to do those off-site determinations. And then they are sending letters to every single one of those properties and asking to come on site and do on-site verification. So performing that wetland determination on site. And we partnered with them on that. And so we sent all of those out in, I think, January or February. Of course, then COVID hit and we got locked down. And so we lost most of our season for doing wetland determinations. So we're going to have to start ramping that back up. And we'd be happy to bring the lead on that, Matt Vesh, forward. He's not here today, but we could bring him to another meeting and have him talk more with you about their strategy for doing that work.
So is he with DSL or with the city of Portland?
He is with the Bureau of Environmental Services. He's the project manager for the wetland inventory project.
Okay, I may follow up outside the meeting. Thanks. I've got next Jeff, and then Katie and Steph. So Jeff. You might be muted, Jeff, I can't hear you at least.
I was muted. My apologies. I was responding quickly to you, Eli. Remember, those wetland delineations that are accepted by DSL and the Corps are only good for 12 to 24 months. So whatever gets done now, if a property doesn't develop down the road, that delineation wouldn't be of any value. Anyway, I had one quick question, but one concern I've got, and this follows up on Chris's comments and concerns and questions. I'm really uncomfortable with the process that we've been given to take public testimony. I mean, what you're saying, Mindy, is you're still working with property owners, you're still massaging the maps, and yet we're going to have our only public hearing in 2 weeks. And so property owners are not going to know where they stand. Maybe they have a meeting scheduled with you, maybe they've had a meeting with you, but there's no result. So we're telling the public, excuse me, here's your one shot to talk to the Planning Commission. And it's not going to be a very good shot because I don't know how we're going to look at exhibits. I assume some of these people are going to want to show us maps or something. So I don't know if we're yet set up to visually see witnesses' presentations. But more importantly, if you're a property owner and you're concerned, how do you know what to say in 2 weeks? I mean, you may still be working with your consultant. You may not have a meeting scheduled with you. And I realize this is not necessarily the process you wanted to design, Mindy, but I'm almost asking a larger question of staff and chair. I mean, what would be the harm in delaying the public hearing until staff feels they're sort of done working with all the property owners? And then at that point, it might be a pretty easy public hearing because you'll have hopefully worked out as much as possible. And there'll be a smaller number of people that aren't satisfied. And so we'll have less to digest. And is there a timeline? Is there any legal reason, or we enter any timeline that says we've got to move on this schedule? Or what would happen if we delay the public hearing for whatever time period you think it's going to take to work through the additional work you want to do? And before I'm going to answer, my other question is, well, I'll come back to my other question. Why don't you?
Okay. I'll try to unpack a few things. Of course, this is your process now. We're in your hands. So you guys get to tell us how you want to do this. This is how we experience what happens with environmental zones. So all the other projects I've worked on, which the E-zones are part of those projects. So, Central City or Airport Futures is part of a larger project, but people don't generally pay attention until we send the Measure 56 notice. That kind of wakes everybody up because it's a big notice. People are like, oh, wow, there's a thing happening. And so we get a lot of requests for us to do site verification at that time. So this is very typical for us, how people react to that Measure 56. In terms of what we're hoping for you guys to vote on, absolutely underlying data still needs to be corrected. But the policy question is, do we stay the course? Do we apply a protection overlay zone to streams and land within 50 feet? Do we apply a protection zone to wetlands and land within 50 feet? Do we apply a C zone to forested canopy in these areas? And we can continue to correct that on a property by property basis, but those are very large policy questions. Do we stay the course with the previous policy direction or not? If we get into a situation where we're looking at individual properties and making a choice on property by property by property on a policy level, then we're spot zoning and we're not treating people equitably. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. There's definitely a question of when's it right to because everybody wants an opportunity to say, my property, the data on my property is not right and we want it fixed. And staff totally support wanting to get that fixed. But we also want to make sure that the conversation we're having with PSC is, what's the policy that we need to bring forward that's appropriate across the board?
Can I jump in here because Mindy, you said earlier that this is not really a policy project.
Exactly.
So if it's not a policy project, it's a mapping.
We're not proposing to change policy. We are stay the course with the original 12 plans and to correct the overlay zones to match that. And so if that's what we're doing, yes, we can continue to correct data underneath of it, but somebody's saying, you know, we're going to hear a lot of, okay, great, the stream's here, but you should only apply the P zone to 25 feet or 10 feet. That's a policy. That would be changing policy. And we're going to hear a lot of that. And that's different than, is the stream on my property or not on my property?
Okay. Thanks. Jeff, you want your follow-up?
Just to clarify, it's the latter concern that I think if a property owner is not satisfied with where you drew the line, I don't have a tree canopy there. Look, here's my evidence. Or you've got the stream corridor here. Actually, when you walk physical evidence of what's on their property, and they were not able to, either they didn't, for whatever reason that you haven't seen their evidence, you haven't accepted it, you don't agree with it. I think we have an obligation to hear that evidence, understand that evidence, and respond. And to do that before they're done with their process review, I think is cart before the horse. I don't think we can do our job efficiently. So I'm back to, and maybe this is a question for the chair and the rest of my commissioners, can we delay the public hearing on this for whatever reasonable period of time it's going to take staff to do what they say they're going to do, which is reach out to more property owners, work with more property owners? And one quick question, Minnie, when did the Measure 56 notice go out?
Measure 56 went out on June 30th.
June 30th. So property owners, and you said many people were sort of awakened to this process when they got that notice. That means property owners are just now, a number of them are getting awakened to what's going on. And yet they've got their first and only public hearing in 2 weeks. I really think we have an obligation to slow this thing down and give these property owners, they're homeowners, they're trying to figure out what's going on. As Mindy said, they're worried. I think we have an obligation to give them a little bit more time before there's a first hearing. I don't know, other commissioners. And my last question, I promise I'm done real quick. There's a process for when you're developing your property, or maybe you just want to put a deck on your property, to come in and say, I believe the E-zone is in the wrong place.
Correct.
They have to pay a significant application fee to do that. And whatever the application fee is, it seems to me if they're coming in to argue you made a mistake, city, they should have a free shot. It shouldn't cost them X dollars to provide evidence, which evidence they probably have to pay for, to prove we're mistaken.
Yeah, so there is a zoning code, a quasi-judicial zoning code process to correct the overlay zones, actually to correct any zone. And that is a free process that can be undertaken by any property owner at any time. And what they do is they fill out a little questionnaire that provides the information. It actually comes to the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I review those along with my colleague, Jeff. And we determine if there is an error in the data. If there is, Bureau of Development Services processes a type 2 land use process. Again, it is free because you're right. If the data is wrong, that's our fault. And so it is a free process. Any property owner can use it at any time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's keep going.
Yeah, that would be me next, I guess. And I'm following up again on Chris too. I just kept, Mindy, I kept hearing you say that that the people that had put in testimony should call you guys. And I was just wondering, would it be that difficult to call them? Because oftentimes I got the sense from reading through the testimony that they didn't really understand the process very well. And also, it seemed to me that even it was odd using the map app and reading the testimony, because I'm pretty used to doing that. And when it's a question of when it's a question that isn't so specific on somebody's property, it seems like it's very easy to tell which way, what the person is trying to tell you. And you get a lot of information that way. But in this case, oftentimes, all you have is their name. You might not have their address. And I couldn't always tell in what natural area they were having difficulties with. And so, it just seemed like there was a lot going on here with these property owners that wasn't, could leave them feeling pretty disaffected if there wasn't some kind of follow-up.
Thank you. Yeah, so we're tagging all of those pieces of testimony that come in that are specifically about the underlying data, and we will do our best to reach back out to those people. If we had a phone number, we'll put them in the loop to call them. If it's just an email, we'll try to get back in touch with them via email as well. So one of our tags is just feature data, and we need to circle back with those people.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. My questions at the beginning of this conversation are different than the ones that I will ask now, which is following up on Chris and Eli's comments, and Jeff, I think, has an open question on the floor. And I tend to feel like if we are going to accept testimony at the time of testimony, we should value that by having something actionable on the other side as a body. And through the course of this conversation, I'm less and less convinced of that. And so, yeah, if more time makes any decisions by us more actionable, and it means that they don't have to duplicate efforts by both testifying to us and connecting with staff, that would be my preference.
Can I toss in one question out of sequence? Did property owners get other information about this project before the Measure 56? Or is this the first thing that they're seeing? Or is this the first thing they're paying attention to?
Yeah, we've done multiple mailings. So over the first year of the project, we sent postcards to every property owner. So we did about 17,000 mailings at that time in postcard form to them. And those were inviting them to open house events and letting them know which different neighborhood meetings we would be at, and inviting them to do site visits. We then, for the discussion draft in November 2019, did a letter mailing to all property owners and a postcard to all properties. So it was a huge mailing, so that we were hitting renters, not just property owners. And again, informing them of the project, sending them through the MAP app, encouraging site visits. We had another 3 open house events after that that we did. And then we did the Measure 56 in June. My experience, this is like my 5th project doing this, my experience is the Measure 56 is what wakes people up. We try really hard to get people involved early on, but the Measure 56 is what people pay most attention to. And then they come in and provide their testimony. In this case, a lot of that testimony is going to be the feature data is wrong. And so then it is our responsibility to respond to that information.
It's Julie here. I just want to jump in and also, because I'm sure PSC members don't know, that there is a very specific timeline guidance that you can send the Measure 56 notice and when your first public hearing is. So it's not that we tried to condense the amount of time that people had to talk to staff in this next month, basically the month. You have to send that Measure 56 notice in a short enough time frame, which is kind of where we're circling with this right now, if that makes sense. So we couldn't have sent that notice 2 months ago to have a hearing on July 28th. There's just, I think it's what is it, Mindy, like a 30 to 45 day or 60 day time frame that you can set, that you're required to send the notice before the first hearing.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. That's a really good point. It's 20 to 40 days before the first hearing, you must send the Measure 56 notice.
So could you not extend the hearing? Assume it's multiple hearings, have one hearing, we kind of work out some of these issues, Minnie, that you're concerned about, hear people's concerns, give you time to do some work and come back and have another hearing.
Absolutely.
Totally an option.
Okay, that's where my mind was going too, but let's talk about this at the officers meeting coming up. I see a few questions, hands up or still up from Chris. Do you have a new comment or question? I got Chris, Jeff, Mike, and Kat. I don't know, these they're not real hands. Okay. Are there any additional questions then? I see Mike's hand up. Mike, do you want to?
Yes, my hand is real.
Okay, and then Ben after you, and then that's all I see right now. Thanks.
Well, I'm glad that Julie brought that up because there's been no effort to curtail people's ability to provide input. I would be adamantly opposed to delaying this. I think Kat's suggestion is a reasonable one where we move forward. I've been through these probably 15 or 20 of these processes. I tell you, every time there are going to be some people who are going to be really upset, and I'm not just diminishing the importance of their testimony, but anytime you talk about land use planning and doing anything with property, people are going to be unhappy. That's just the way it is. I read through a lot of the testimony, and to me, most of what I saw, I thought fell into the, I just don't want you to do this bucket, not the technical, is the line right or not. I may be wrong on that. I haven't read through all the testimony, but that's just a fact that we're going to get people who are not going to be pleased about perceived impositions on their property. This project has been going on for a long time. You saw 400 visits, 17,000 properties are being affected. Is that correct, Mindy? Do I have that correct? Out of 17,000 properties, there's pretty minor amount of testimony in my estimation. I just don't think there's a reason not to proceed, understanding that there may be a need to have more than one hearing, which is totally fair.
Okay, thanks. Ben, and then maybe Joe to wrap us up.
I'm hearing the argument from both sides, both Mike's and Jeff. One thing that concerns me is that we would likely see, if we proceed with the current schedule, 2 different amendment packages. And so one will go through PSC, the other one will go through City Council. I think for fairness and clarity, and probably to get a better picture on all of the amendments, I think it would be great to have all the amendment packages as part of our own process before it goes to City Council.
We'll do the best we can on that, knowing that despite those efforts, there'll still be new ones for council, I'm sure. Thanks. And Joe.
Yeah, thank you all. This is, I think this whole discussion about the hearing and the scheduling is spot on. And the experience of the past is that we're going to have a flood at the end, and we'll have another sort of pulse of this at City Council. And the hearing,
figurative flood.
What's that?
Figuratively.
Figuratively. But
a landslide, perhaps.
We need to at the officers meeting sort of map this out about what it takes. We also have a staff. Limited staff resources to get out and do the visits. So we have to see how much is coming in and be able to respond to that. So to be able to give you all the service or give you all the information you need to be able to make decisions. And that's going to draw out the number of hearings that we need to do. So we need to figure that out, and we'll follow up at officers on that. And our best efforts will be to cover this as thoroughly as we can, because we don't want to amendment packages either, because City Council's in the same situation you are, and whoever comes in later, it's going to seem like a big deal, and may just be the same deal as you're going to have heard many times through the testimony that you're doing. We try to manage that so it's as fair and transparent as possible. So it's going to take longer than just one hearing, is what I'm hearing. And I need to talk to Mindy and Daniel just to see what we're actually seeing and how we would suss out how long that's going to take to really get assessed. Okay.
Thank you, Joe. I see Jeff, you're down now. Any other final comments? Well, thank you, Mindy and Daniel. And we'll talk to you in officers meeting in a couple of days.
All right, thank you guys so much.
All right, with that, our meeting is adjourned, and we'll touch base in a couple of weeks at 4 o'clock. Thank you.